Chapter 539. Huang Wujiboom. The tremendous storm of sword images shattered like tofu under the bone spear's attack. Afterwards, the surging bone spear did not lose any momentum at all and directly slammed into the three men's chests. Spurt. Blood violently spurted out as the three men vomited blood. Their faces were ghastly pale as they were sent flying over a dozen meters away. Rocks scattered in all directions as the ground cracked. "I'll give you one last chance. If you still don't retreat, don't blame me for being merciless." Raising the bone spear in his right hand, Zhuo Wen's eyes were filled with cold killing intent as he pointed the spear tip at the three men in front of him. The hook-nosed young man's eyes flickered as he glanced at Zhuowen with extreme fear. He had never imagined that Zhuowen would be so powerful. He had broken through their combined attack with a single strike. His strength did not seem like a cultivator who had just broken through to the third wheel of the ultimate emperor realm. "Let's go." After a moment of silence, the hook-nosed young man still chose to retreat. He did not want to lose his life because of the inheritance key. As a result, the three of them left the ruins in a sorry state. "Zhuowen, you've saved me again." Suddenly, Qing Lian arrived before Zhuowen. She took out the flickering inheritance key and passed it to Zhuowen. She said, "From the looks of it, you don't have the inheritance key yet. Take this key." At this moment, Ouyang Hanxian had also arrived by Zhuowen's side. A sliver of surprise appeared in his eyes when he saw that Qing Lian had actually taken the initiative to pass the inheritance key to Zhuowen. However, he quickly revealed a wretched smile that did not match his temperament. "Brother Zhuo, you have to accept Miss Qing Lian's kindness. After all, Miss Qing Lian isn't so nice to everyone," Ouyang Hanxian snickered. Qing Lian immediately blushed when she heard Ouyang Hanxian's meaningful words. She looked like a tender and juicy red apple, tempting others to take a bite. However, to Qing Lian and Ouyang Hanxian's disbelief, Zhuowen shook his head and said, "The inheritance key is far too precious. This thing has undeniable benefits to you. I cannot accept it." Clear Lotus grew anxious. She was well aware of Zhuowen's strength. With Zhuowen's strength and potential, he was the most suitable candidate to enter the legacy land. He might even have the chance to obtain an ancient legacy. As for Qing Lian, she was very clear about her own strength. Once she entered the land of inheritance, she would only be able to mingle around the periphery. She would not be able to touch the ancient inheritance at all. Compared to Zhuowen, this key was obviously a waste for her. "Say no more. Wasn't there a key left in the ancient ruins? The last key might be obtained by me." Zhuowen shook his head and spoke indifferently. But, whoosh, whoosh. Just as Qing Lian was about to say something, the sound of something breaking through the air came from afar. In the distant sky, there were 40 to 50 figures rushing over at an extremely fast speed. "Oh no! The other warriors have gathered. Qing Lian, hurry up and leave. If you're late, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave." Zhuowen's face changed slightly and he hurriedly said to Qing Lian beside him. Qing Lian also saw the black mass of people in the distance and her pretty face immediately turned ghastly pale. Moreover, when she saw Zhuowen's determined attitude, she could only sigh secretly and say, "Zhuowen, I hope you're lucky enough to obtain the last key." After saying that, Qing Lian did not delay any longer. Her jade feet tapped on the ground and her entire body flew in the opposite direction like a graceful butterfly. As the inheritance key would emit a rather dazzling light, the crowd that rushed over from afar immediately saw that the inheritance key was with Qing Lian. The man at the front of the crowd in the distance was glaring angrily. When he saw that Qing Lian was about to escape, he shouted loudly. Unknowingly, he had taken out an axe and threw it with his right hand. The axe was like a meteor in the night sky. It cut through the void and directly blasted towards Qing Lian in the distance. What a powerful aura. A trace of surprise involuntarily appeared on Zhuowen's face when he felt the powerful aura of the axe flying through the air. The cultivation of the man at the front had actually reached the ultimate three-wheel emperor realm. Qing Lian's cultivation was only at the intermediate ultimate two-wheel emperor realm. If she was hit by the axe, she would definitely be seriously injured. With a cold snort, Zhuowen's right hand, which was holding the shaft of the bone spear, rotated. Immediately, the bone spear shot up. The tip of the spear, which contained a cold glint, accurately struck the axe in midair. The powerful force immediately caused the axe's trajectory to change. It landed 10 meters to the left of Qing Lian. "Who is it? How dare you ruin my plans?" Just as the broad axe was about to strike Qing Lian, who was fleeing in the distance, it was unexpected that a strange bone spear would appear midway and block the broad axe. This naturally caused the man to be furious and his eyes to crack. Swoosh! Very quickly, the man who had thrown the axe landed in the ruins of the main hall. Qing Lian had long since disappeared, so the man's gaze immediately locked onto Zhuowen below. He clearly remembered that the bone spear that had broken his axe was the work of this brat before him. The man was tall and burly. His eyebrows were vertical, and he gave off a dignified aura. At this moment, his eyes were wide open as he stared coldly at Zhuowen in front of him. He said, "Brat, why did you protect that woman just now? Are you looking to die?" Swoosh, swoosh. At the same time, the 30 to 40 cultivators behind them who had been slower had also arrived at the ruins of the main hall. When they saw the tall man and Zhuowen facing off in the distance, they all began to discuss spiritedly. "It's actually the number one genius of the number one clan in the prefecture capital, the Huang family, Huang Wuji. It's said that Huang Wuji has already reached the intermediate ultimate three-wheel emperor realm. He's extremely powerful. So it's someone from the Huang family. It's said that the Huang family is the only clan in the prefecture capital that's second only to the 5 super forces. As the number one genius of the Huang family, Huang Wuji is indeed very powerful. The one holding the bone spear seems to be Zhuowen, who broke the record at Zhongling Mountain. I never thought that these two people would actually meet. Looks like there's going to be a good show to watch." Hearing the discussions around them, the tall man's identity was clear. He was actually a genius of the number one clan in the prefecture capital, the Huang family. No wonder he was so powerful. He was even more powerful than Ling Tian City's genius, Ling Wushuang. "Heh. So you're Zhuowen? Speak. Why did you block my axe?" Huang Wuji looked at the inconspicuous Zhuowen in astonishment. Zhuowen's performance in Zhongling Mountain was extremely valiant. Huang Wuji naturally knew about this. Now that he took a closer look, he really recognized that the young man in front of him was Zhuowen. In Huang Wuji's eyes, although Zhuowen's performance at Zhongling Mountain was extremely shocking, his own strength was too low. Therefore, he didn't put this Zhuowen in his eyes at all. Instead, he revealed an ominous glint, his eyes filled with coldness. "I just feel that your axe is too much of a hindrance. What? Do you have a problem with it?" Zhuowen coldly stared at Zhuowen. He suddenly took a step forward, and a terrifying aura surged out. The air around him turned into a spiral around Zhuowen. The aura of an ultimate three-wheel emperor was fully displayed. Zhuowen didn't plan on wasting time with Huang Wuji and the others. Therefore, he directly revealed his own aura so that these people wouldn't bother him. After all, he still planned on searching for the last inheritance key. What an arrogant fellow. Do you think you're amazing just because you took first place at Zhongling Mountain? You're still weaker than me. If you don't give me an explanation, then don't even think about. Hey! Huang Wuji was only halfway through his sentence when his expression froze. He stared straight at the youth before him. The aura emanating from the youth before him was even stronger than his own. This was the aura of a peak three-wheel ultimate emperor realm cultivator. Ultimate three-wheel emperor? Zhuowen has actually reached the peak of the ultimate three-wheel emperor. I remember that Zhuowen has only just undergone his third heavenly tribulation, right? How did he reach this level so quickly? What a freak. Heh. Then Huang Wuji is in for it. If the two of them fight, Huang Wuji will definitely lose. I wonder if Huang Wuji still wants to cause trouble for Zhuowen? An uproar immediately broke out in the surroundings. Some people even had gloating looks in their eyes. They still remembered that Huang Wuji had planned on teaching Zhuowen a lesson. They wondered what Huang Wuji would do now that Zhuowen had revealed the aura of an ultimate three-wheel emperor. Don't think about what. Continue speaking. Zhuowen raised his head slightly and smiled faintly. His indifferent voice slowly rang out in the ruins of the hall. Huang Wuji's heart twitched when he heard this. He really wanted to slap himself a few times. He had never imagined that Zhuowen would actually reach the peak of the ultimate three-wheel emperor. How did this guy cultivate? How could he be so fast? Huang Wuji's expression turned even uglier when he saw Zhuowen closing in on him. He took a few steps back and laughed awkwardly. I was only joking just now. Brother Zhuo, you don't have to take it seriously. Heh. Many people in the surroundings revealed looks of disdain when they heard Huang Wuji's words. They inwardly cursed Huang Wuji for bullying the weak and fearing the strong. Even though Huang Wuji was thick-skinned, he still couldn't bear the disdainful gazes from the surroundings. His face burned. However, Zhuowen shook his head. He couldn't afford to waste time here. Finding the last inheritance key was more important. He slowly walked over to where the bone spear was stuck. At this moment, the bone spear was stuck in an inconspicuous rock. Zhuowen didn't pay too much attention to it. He grabbed the spear shaft and pulled it out. To his astonishment, a blazing white light shot out from the crack in the rock the moment the rock cracked. The beam of light pierced through the sky and actually formed a huge shadow in the sky. It looked sacred and dignified. At the same time, a key glowing with light slowly floated up from the crack in the rock and finally stopped in Zhuowen's palm. Chapter 540. Encirclement and Suppression. It's actually the last inheritance key. Above the ruins of the large hall, everyone's gazes were fixed on Zhuowen's palm, where the inheritance key lay quietly. Immediately, everyone's breathing became rough and heavy. At this moment, Zhuowen was also stunned. He had never imagined that the last inheritance key would actually be hidden in such an inconspicuous rock. Even more so, he had never imagined that he would actually stumble upon it. Ouyang Hanxian suddenly came to Zhuowen's side and said solemnly in a low voice, "Brother Zhuo, be careful. There are too many cultivators here. Moreover, this is the last key. I'm afraid that the others will do you harm." Zhuowen only returned to his senses after Ouyang Hanxian's reminder. With a flip of his right hand, he placed the inheritance key into his Qiankuan bag. He raised his head slightly and surveyed his surroundings. He saw that the cultivators in the surroundings had actually surrounded him and Ouyang Hanxian at some point in time. Their eyes were filled with greed and desire. There were at least 30 to 40 cultivators in the surroundings. Moreover, most of them were around the second wheel of the Ultimate Emperor realm. There were even a few third wheel Ultimate Emperor realm cultivators. With so many people working together, even Zhuowen would find it difficult to deal with them. At this moment, the originally silent Huang Wuji suddenly stood in front of everyone and shouted, "Everyone can see that the last inheritance key has fallen into Zhuowen's hands. This time, we can't let this kid escape. Although this kid is a peak third wheel Ultimate Emperor realm cultivator, he's still only one person. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. How can this kid be a match for all of us? As long as we work together and kill this kid, the ownership of the key will depend on our own abilities." How does that sound? After he finished speaking, Huang Wuji's eyes were filled with coldness as he looked at Zhuowen nearby. There was even a trace of schadenfreude on his face. Earlier, Zhuowen had made a fool of him in front of everyone. That memory was still fresh in his mind. Now that he had the opportunity, he naturally wanted to play the blame game. Seeing that Huang Wuji had suddenly become active, the surrounding people were dissatisfied with him. However, this wasn't the time for them to dwell on this matter. Instead, they should consider working together to obtain the inheritance key from Zhuowen's hands. Zhuowen stared coldly at the vile Huang Wuji in front of him. A trace of killing intent began to rise in his heart. Originally, he hadn't taken Huang Wuji seriously. Naturally, he had no interest in killing this clown. However, Huang Wuji had actually openly encouraged others to kill him in front of him. This naturally made Zhuowen's mood. Zhuowen was extremely displeased. "Brother Hanxian, this place is no longer safe, you should leave the Vitality Tower first," Zhuowen suddenly said to Ouyang Hanxian beside him. "Brother Zhuo, be careful. If you're not a match for him, it's best to leave the tower." Ouyang Hanxian also knew that his current strength was weak. If he stayed by Zhuowen's side, he would simply be a burden. He nodded his head and straightforwardly took out his identity token. After that, he turned into a beam of light and disappeared from where he stood. Zhuowen, hand over the inheritance key and we can spare your life. That's right. Although you're a peak ultimate three-wheel emperor, it's still difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. I advise you to hand over the inheritance key. That way, you can suffer less. You're just a cultivator from a small low-level city. You have no power or influence. Offending a group of people like us is not a wise choice. Hand over the inheritance key. The surrounding cultivators all stared at Zhuowen with fiery eyes as if they were staring at a delicacy. Moreover, they closed in on him step by step. Their auras burst forth to the extreme, wanting to suppress Zhuowen. Zhuowen, you only have 2 choices now. Hand over the inheritance key or die. At this moment, Huang Wuji also became fearless, as if he had already forgotten the scene of him showing weakness in front of Zhuowen. Clang! Zhuowen lightly flicked the bone spear. The crisp sound was like the roar of a dragon, reverberating through the flat ground. His face was calm as he said indifferently, I won't hand over the inheritance key, and I won't die either. Since you won't hand it over, then go to hell. Everyone, attack together and finish off this Zhuowen. So what if this kid is a peak ultimate three-wheel emperor? Under our encirclement, only death awaits him, Huang Wuji shouted, but he didn't charge out first. Although the surrounding people were disdainful of Huang Wuji's actions, they were now facing a common enemy, so they didn't care about Huang Wuji's petty actions. Each of them took out their own unique skills and attacked Zhuowen. Kill this Zhuowen and take the inheritance key. Instantly, everyone used their own moves. For a moment, colorful energy suddenly rose into the air. It was as if a rainbow had appeared in the air. These were the colors of the energy used by the various cultivators. Boom, boom, boom. The colorful energy formed by the various moves was extraordinarily powerful. The surrounding space already showed signs of collapsing. Powerful auras overflowed in all directions. Countless cyclones swirled and rippled as they attacked. The aura of the 5-colored energy caused even the surrounding people to feel a trace of fear. They hadn't imagined that the strange 5-colored energy formed by their random moves would be so powerful. Perhaps even an ordinary 4-wheel ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator wouldn't be able to withstand it. What a powerful energy. This Zhuowen is probably dead for sure. This thought flashed through everyone's minds. They could all feel the powerful might of this energy. It's good that this Zhuowen is dead. He made a fool of me, Huang Wuji, so he should be prepared to die. Huang Wuji, who wasn't far away, had a smug look on his face. He looked at Zhuowen as if he was looking at a dead man. He didn't believe that Zhuowen had any chance of surviving such a powerful attack. At this moment, Zhuowen, who was under the colorful energy, had a rare solemn look on his face. He hadn't expected that the combined energy of 30 to 40 cultivators around him would be so terrifying. This level of energy was enough to threaten an ultimate 4-wheel emperor. Advance and the arrogant dragon will regret. Retreat and the thistle will grow. Arrogant dragon style, break for me. Stepping forward, Zhuowen gripped the tyrannical dragon-scale bone spear with both hands. The spear tilted from top to bottom as his right foot pushed forward. An incomparably powerful aura burst forth. It was as if Zhuowen and the tyrannical dragon-scale bone spear had become one. A resounding dragon's roar reverberated above the ruins. Then, the space behind Zhuowen cracked. A dragon head as large as a mountain fell from the crack in space. Countless strands of dragon chi were like strong winds that tore through space and tore through the air. The dragon head as large as a mountain opened its ferocious mouth and smashed towards the colorful energy in the sky. When the two collided, an earth-shattering explosion rang out continuously. Countless ring-shaped airwaves spread out in all directions. The space was like glass, directly collapsing and shattering. What a powerful move! But it's still not enough to break through our combined attack. The expressions of the surrounding people changed when they saw how powerful Zhuowen's arrogant dragon style was. They hurriedly increased the output of their yuan qi. Instantly, The colorful energy in the sky crushed the dragon head. A cold glint arrived first. Then, the spear struck out like a dragon, subduing dragon style. Come on. Zhuowen's spear momentum did not change. He swung his bone spear and immediately executed the second move of the tyrannical dragon-scale bone spear, the subduing dragon style. Suddenly, a dragon's roar filled the sky. A coiled dragon slowly appeared with Zhuowen in the center. Zhuowen could even see the ferocious dragon scales on the coiled dragon's body. They were dazzling and glaring under the light. The subduing dragon style was a defensive move. When Zhuowen saw that the arrogant dragon style could not break through the colorful energy, he naturally did not intend to meet force with force. As long as he defended against the colorful energy, the surrounding people would definitely reveal their weaknesses. After all, everyone had executed their most powerful moves. Their bodies would definitely be empty at that moment. Boom! The colorful energy finally slammed into the coiled dragon. The dragon's roar and the sound of an explosion rang out continuously. Countless spiraling waves of air swirled in all directions, sweeping up the dust. It was a terrifying sight. The surrounding people retreated one after another due to the waves of air. Their gazes were focused on the center of the explosion. They wanted to see if Zhuowen would die a tragic death under such an explosion. Hee. This Zhuowen is dead meat. Huang Wuji crossed his arms in front of his chest. His face was filled with confidence as he stared at the center of the explosion. Suddenly, a dazzling golden light, like a small sun, spread out from the center of the explosion. It was as if a sun was slowly rising from the center of the explosion. Boom! 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 The center of the explosion suddenly dissipated at this moment. The terrifying colorful energy seemed to be suppressed by the golden light and was annihilated. Boom! Boom! A figure covered in golden light slowly walked out from the center of the dust cloud. This figure raised his head slightly, revealing a delicate and handsome face. It was Zhuowen. When the crowd saw this unscathed figure covered in golden veins, the scene instantly became incomparably silent. Everyone stared blankly at this figure. They hadn't expected that the combined attack of 30 to 40 people would be broken by Zhuowen just like that. One had to know that this kind of energy was enough to threaten a four-wheel ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator, but Zhuowen had still broken through it. What did this mean? This Zhuowen's strength is comparable to a four-wheel ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator. We're no match for him at all. Run! When Zhuowen finally appeared in front of everyone, the surrounding people finally scattered like monkeys when the tree fell. They suddenly fled in all directions. This Zhuowen was really too abnormal. Even the joint forces of 30 to 40 people couldn't kill him. If they didn't flee now, they might not be able to keep their lives. In just an instant, everyone fled like mad dogs. Among them, Huang Wuji fled faster than anyone else. At this moment, he was already 100 miles away. Chapter 541. Golden Dome Bell. Do you think you can escape? Zhuowen raised his head slightly, his eyes filled with coldness. He formed a seal with his hands and two pairs of dazzling lightning wings appeared on his back. With a flap of his lightning wings, Zhuowen transformed into a bolt of lightning and disappeared from where he stood. Swoosh! At this moment, Huang Wuji, who was at the very front, had a panicked expression on his face. He cursed in a low voice, "How is this Zhuowen so abnormal? He's clearly only a peak ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator, but he was able to break through the combined attacks of 30 to 40 people. Has he been hiding his strength all this time?" A trace of fear appeared on Huang Wuji's face. Earlier, he had been targeting Zhuowen at every turn. He was afraid that Zhuowen wouldn't let him off so easily. Therefore, Huang Wuji was the first to flee when he sensed that something was wrong. "I've already fled so far. It's unlikely that Zhuowen will be able to catch up to me." Huang Wuji tilted his head slightly and looked at the ruins of the hall that had almost become a small hay dot behind him. Fear still lingered on his face. He had truly been shocked when Zhuowen had broken through the five-colored energy with a single hand. Such a powerful energy was enough to threaten the full-powered attack of an ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator, but Zhuowen had actually broken through it so openly. This could only mean that Zhuowen's strength was comparable to an Ultimate Emperor Realm Cultivator, and he might even be stronger than the average Ultimate Emperor Realm Cultivator. If I encounter this Zhuowen again, I'd better hide as far away as possible. I really can't afford to offend this person. At this moment, Huang Wuji was several thousand kilometers away from the ruins of the hall. He believed that he had already shaken off Zhuowen, so he relaxed slightly and slowed down. Next time? Perhaps there won't be a next time. Suddenly, a cold voice rumbled from behind Huang Wuji. It was like thunder rumbling in Huang Wuji's ears, causing him to shudder involuntarily. What? Huang Wuji's pupils shrank. He turned around and immediately saw a human-shaped lightning bolt several hundred meters behind him. It was approaching him at an unbelievable speed. In the blink of an eye, the human-shaped lightning bolt had unknowingly arrived in front of him. The lightning dissipated, revealing a slender figure. Shua. When? Huang Wuji suddenly stuttered. His eyes reflected the figure in front of him. His lips trembled and a trace of despair rose in his heart. He didn't expect Zhuowen to be so fast. Just as Huang Wuji was about to explain, a cold light streaked across the sky and pierced towards Huang Wuji's neck. The sharp qi pierced through Huang Wuji's body like countless hidden weapons. Zhuowen didn't give Huang Wuji any chance at all. He didn't want to waste his breath on such a despicable person. He would just kill him directly. Seeing that Zhuowen attacked without saying anything, Huang Wuji's eyes revealed a trace of ruthlessness. He knew that Zhuowen was determined to kill him. He snorted coldly and no longer retreated. He patted his Chenkuan bag and took out a small golden bell. Dong dong. The crisp sound of a bell resounded clearly in the sky. The small golden bell gave off a bright golden light and instantly grew into a large golden bell that was several meters tall. It enveloped Huang Wuji's entire body, forming an extremely terrifying defense. Ding! The tyrannical dragon-scale bone spear fiercely bombarded the surface of the large golden bell. Sparks flew and crisp sounds rang out continuously. It couldn't pierce through the large golden bell at all. On the other hand, Zhuowen was forced to retreat more than 10 steps under the impact of the impact. Haha. Zhuowen, I know you're very strong, but this golden bell is a top-grade Earth-tier spirit treasure. It's an existence at the peak of Earth-tier spirit treasures. Its defense is beyond your imagination. Hehe, so what if your strength is comparable to a 4-wheel Ultimate Emperor Realm Cultivator? You still can't break through this golden bell. Within the bell, Huang Wuji stared at Zhuowen with a ferocious expression. His face was filled with a loathsome and disgusting smile, and the corners of his mouth even curled up into a mocking smile. The golden bell was one of the most precious spirit treasures of his Huang family. His father, the patriarch of the Huang family, had made an exception and given such a powerful spirit treasure to Huang Wuji for his safety. It was just in case. Top-grade Earth-tier spirit treasure? Zhuowen's expression immediately changed when he heard Huang Wuji's words. He hadn't expected that Huang Wuji, who wasn't very strong, would actually possess such a spirit treasure. One had to know that spirit treasures were divided into low, mid, high, and top grade. The top grade was the highest and also the most powerful spirit treasure. The golden bell was a top-grade Earth-tier spirit treasure. Its power was not something that other spirit treasures could compare to. It was an existence that was extremely close to a heaven-tier spirit treasure. It was no wonder that Zhuowen's tyrannical dragon-scale bone spear was unable to do anything to the golden bell. After all, there was a huge difference between the two spirit treasures. I don't believe that I can't break through it. A cold light flickered in Zhuowen's eyes. He suddenly swung his right hand, and the tyrannical dragon-scale bone spear turned into countless spear shadows that fiercely met the golden bell. Clang! 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 Countless sparks flew in all directions like meteors falling from the night sky. The crisp sound of metal clashing continuously rang out on the flat ground. However, the golden bell was like the toughest tortoiseshell. It wasn't damaged at all. On the contrary, the tyrannical dragon-scale bone spear in Zhuowen's hand actually showed signs of dimming. Haha. Zhuowen, I think you should stop wasting your strength. With your strength, it's impossible for you to shatter this golden bell. Unless you have strength that surpasses a four-wheel ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator, you can forget about breaking through the golden bell. Seeing that Zhuowen was unable to do anything to the golden bell, Huang Wuji inside let out a sigh of relief. His face was filled with pride, and the corners of his mouth curved into a mocking smile. Although Zhuowen was strong, the golden bell was a top-grade Earth-tier spirit treasure. It wasn't something that an ordinary person could shatter. In Huang Wuji's opinion, only an expert as strong as Elviatao might be able to shatter the golden bell. As for Zhuowen, he probably wasn't qualified. At this moment, Zhuowen was truly enraged, especially when he saw Huang Wuji's smug expression inside the golden bell cage. It was as if he was asking for a beating, which made Zhuowen even angrier. It seems that it's really difficult to shatter this golden bell if I don't use my full strength. His eyes flashing, Zhuowen finally put away the tyrannical dragonscale bone spear. He knew that the tyrannical dragonscale bone spear was only a mid-grade Earth-tier spirit treasure. It was 2 grades lower than the golden bell, so it was impossible for it to shatter the golden bell. Seeing Zhuowen put away the tyrannical dragonscale bone spear, Huang Wuji's smug expression became even more intense. He sneered, "Didn't I say it before? With your strength, it's impossible for you to break this golden bell. In the end, you're just a lowly citizen of a low-level city. In front of our Huang clan, your low-level city is just like an ant. Hee. After leaving the spirit tower, you better wash your neck and wait for our Huang clan's revenge. When the time comes, I'll make you wish you were dead." Huang Wuji's face was full of pride. Zhuowen ignored Huang Wuji's mockery and took a deep breath. Unknowingly, his pupils had already turned into a golden color, appearing extremely strange. At the same time, a dense golden light gradually appeared around his body. "Open 100 acupoints." With a low shout, all 100 acupoints in Zhuowen's body opened at this moment. Instantly, the surface of his body was covered with dense and terrifying golden veins. Zhuowen's aura also skyrocketed to an extremely terrifying level. Huang Wuji also noticed Zhuowen's abnormality, but he did not take it to heart. He had blind confidence in the golden bell. After all, this was one of the Huang clan's most powerful spirit treasures. It was not so easy to shatter. In his opinion, it was impossible for the golden bell to shatter. "Yo. From the looks of it, you're planning to shatter my golden bell with your fists. Haha. How laughable. You better be careful later. Don't hurt your arm." Looking at Zhuowen, who was covered in golden light, Huang Wuji did not hold back at all. "You don't have to worry, because you're going to be a dead man soon." Zhuowen's voice was extremely cold, as if it came from the depths of hell. Then, he stomped his foot and arrived in front of the golden bell in an instant. His right fist, which was covered with golden veins, smashed into the golden bell without hesitation. Rumble. An earth-shattering sound suddenly spread out. The seemingly indestructible golden bell actually showed signs of collapsing. Huang Wuji, who was inside, swayed left and right pathetically and crashed into the wall of the bell. What? He actually shook the golden bell? Huang Wuji barely managed to stabilize his body. The complacent look on his face instantly froze and was replaced by a look of disbelief. The young man in front of him actually shook the golden bell with the strength of his physical body. "Humph. You only shook the golden bell. You do have some ability, but there's still a long way to go before you can shatter it." Gradually calming down, Huang Wuji revealed a cold smile on his face. Zhuowen did not say anything. Instead, he stomped his foot again. The golden light in his eyes burned brighter, and an even more powerful aura burst out. "Open 200 acupoints." Muttering, Zhuowen punched again. This punch was like a small sun, shooting golden light in all directions and tearing the air apart. Rumble. The fist collided with the golden bell again. This time, the golden bell, which was motionless like a boulder, suddenly buzzed and retreated. The brilliance on its surface gradually dimmed. "What? This guy, how is this possible?" Huang Wuji, who was inside the golden bell, narrowed his eyes to the size of needles. A trace of shock finally appeared on his face. The brilliance on the surface of the golden bell had dimmed. This was clearly a sign that it was damaged. However, Zhuowen did not stop because of this. Zhuoan suddenly jumped up, and the golden light on his body reached its peak. He fell from the sky like a falling sun. Open 300 acupoints. Break it for me. Chapter 542. Purple smoke erodes the bone boom. After opening 300 acupoints, Zhuoan's strength had reached a level where it could shatter mountains. The intense golden light caused Huang Wuji to involuntarily narrow his eyes. When Zhuoan's third punch landed on the golden bell, the world fell silent. Then, an earth-shattering sound echoed throughout the world. The seemingly indestructible golden bell began to shake violently. Cracks began to appear on its surface. The aftermath of the powerful force penetrated the golden bell's surface and seeped into it. Huang Wuji, who was inside the bell, actually spat out a mouthful of blood. He covered his ears with both hands as blood slowly flowed out from his 7 orifices. How is this possible? How can Zhuoan be so strong? Huang Wuji's face was already filled with shock. He had not expected Zhuoan to be so strong that even the golden bell could not block it. This was simply too unbelievable. Crack. A crisp sound slowly rang out. Then, Huang Wuji's pupils shrank as he discovered that cracks had unknowingly appeared on the golden bell's surface. Moreover, these cracks were still spreading. When all the cracks had covered the entire body of the golden bell, the top-grade Earth-ranked golden bell actually shattered into countless pieces before his eyes. Boom! A fist that was suffused with golden light smashed into Huang Wuji's abdomen amidst the countless fragments. An incomparably powerful force exploded, forming a spiral-shaped storm in the surrounding air. Poochie! Huang Wuji spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body fell from the sky like a withered leaf. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the cold-faced figure above him. At that moment, his eyes were filled with regret. He knew that if he hadn't offended Zhuoan, and if he hadn't mocked and ridiculed him, he wouldn't have died in such a manner. However, there was no medicine for regret in this world. Bang! Huang Wuji directly smashed a huge hole in the ground. His eyes were wide open, and he was no longer breathing. He died with remaining grievances. After dealing with Huang Wuji, Zhuoan raised his head slightly and looked around, only to discover that the other cultivators had already fled without a trace. Knowing that even if he chased after them now, it would be pointless, so he had no choice but to give up. Since I've obtained the last legacy key, it's time to head to the land of legacy. Zhuoan took out the shiny inheritance key, and a ray of light shot out from the key towards the end of the ancient ruins. He knew that the direction of the ray of light was the direction of the inheritance land. At that moment, Zhuoan did not hesitate. He stomped his foot and his speed soared to the limit as he rushed towards the end. There was a trace of passion in his eyes. He knew that with the blood demon token and the bronze coffin, he had a high chance of successfully obtaining the most powerful inheritance in the land of inheritance. It was also the most dangerous inheritance, the blood demon inheritance. At the end of the ancient ruins, there was a basin that spanned several thousand kilometers. Purple mist lingered around this huge basin. This purple mist was extremely terrifying and contained an extremely terrifying poison. Even if a 9-wheel Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator entered this purple mist, they would probably die in less than 10 breaths of time. This showed just how terrifying this purple mist was. This basin surrounded by purple mist was the most mysterious existence in the ancient ruins, the land of inheritance. Only those who held the inheritance key would not be corroded by the terrifying purple mist. This was also the reason why the inheritance key was so important. The most important reason was because of the terrifying purple mist in front of them. Swoosh! A black bolt of lightning suddenly shot down from the horizon and arrived above the huge basin in an instant. Zhuoan lowered his head slightly and stared at the constantly churning purple mist with a grave expression. This purple mist should be the purple mist bone erosion. It's an extremely terrifying miasma. Even a 9-wheel Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator would probably die in a short period of time if they were to fall into the purple mist bone erosion. This thing was notorious in the ancient times. Xiao Hei's voice slowly rang out in his head. His voice had become extremely grave. Clearly, he was extremely fearful of the purple mist bone erosion. Purple mist bone erosion? Even a 9-wheel ultimate Emperor realm cultivator might die. Zhuowen's eyes could not help but narrow when he heard that. Was the purple mist below really so terrifying that even a 9-wheel ultimate Emperor realm cultivator might die if they were to fall into it? You don't need to doubt it. The purple mist bone erosion was extremely infamous in the ancient times. Even the 4 exalted realm cultivators were unwilling to fall into it. Although the purple mist bone erosion is unable to kill the 4 exalted realm cultivators, it can put them into an extremely miserable state, Xiao He said cautiously. However, I've investigated earlier. The purple mist bone erosion seems to be extremely fearful of the inheritance key in your hand. As long as you have the inheritance key, you'll be able to successfully pass through the purple mist bone erosion. Zhuowen nodded when he heard that. He also understood that the inheritance key was the key to passing through the purple mist. Let's go. With the key in hand, Zhuowen took a step forward and directly entered the purple mist. However, what surprised him was that the moment he entered the purple mist, the key in his hand immediately emitted a gentle white light. The white light was like a protective barrier that surrounded Zhuowen and blocked the corrosion of the purple mist. The gravity in the purple mist is many times stronger than outside. The moment he entered the purple mist, Zhuowen felt his body become heavy. His feet felt as if they were filled with lead and became extremely heavy, causing him to stagger as he walked. The purple mist bone erosion is not an ordinary mist. It is much denser than ordinary mist. That's why you feel your footsteps become heavy within the purple mist bone erosion. It's not because the gravity inside has become stronger, but because the purple mist itself is very heavy, Xiao He explained rather patiently. Nodding his head, Zhuowen slowly walked forward with heavy steps. He knew that as long as he passed through the purple mist, he would completely enter the boundary of the inheritance ground. Along the way, Zhuowen saw many scattered skeletons. It could be said that the path within the purple mist was like the path to hell. With every few steps, Zhuowen could see piles of white bones. Zhuowen even discovered that some of the skeletons had extremely powerful auras. Even though they had been dead for so long, they were still able to leave behind such powerful auras. The owner of these skeletons must have been extremely terrifying when he was alive. At the very least, he was an existence that far surpassed Zhuowen. Zhuowen knew that the owner of these skeletons was very likely a genuine ultimate 9-wheel emperor. Xiao He was right. The purple mist bone erosion was indeed terrifying. Even an ultimate 9-wheel emperor had perished in this area. This reality caused Zhuowen, who was originally unconcerned, to become vigilant and serious. He knew that the inheritance ground was definitely not simple. If he made a wrong move, he might have to pay the price of his life. After about 2 hours, Zhuowen walked out of the strange purple mist and arrived in front of an extremely grand stone door. The stone door was several hundred meters tall. Zhuowen seemed as tiny as an ant as he stood before it. 2 large stone statues stood on either side of the stone door. The stone statues were dressed in martial attire and wielded huge spears. Their heads were lowered, and their huge eyes silently looked down on all life below the stone door. It was as if the 2 stone statues could see through all the vicissitudes of the world. Looking at the gazes of the 2 statues, Zhuowen could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. He discovered that if he stared at the gazes of the 2 statues, he could not help but feel a trace of dizziness. Zhuowen was so startled that he hurriedly looked away, not daring to look at the statues again. At this moment, 9 figures sat beneath the huge stone door. Zhuowen's arrival had attracted the attention of the 9 figures. Zhuowen. Among the 9 figures, an elegant and beautiful woman suddenly smiled. She hurriedly waved at Zhuowen. She was Qing Lian, who had obtained the 9th key. The other 8 people were the other candidates that possessed the inheritance key. They were respectively LV Itao, Luo Xing, Zhu Kai, Qin Batian, Xu Tianliang, Ling Wushuang, and 2 men that Zhuowen had never seen before. However, from the presence of the 2 men, they were not very powerful. They were even weaker than Ling Wushuang. Clearly, they were around the peak of the 2nd wheel Ultimate King realm. They were at the bottom of the group. This little bastard really did obtain the last key. Looks like we're quite lucky. Zhu Kai licked his lips. His eyes were bloodshot as he said to Shu Tianliang beside him. At this moment, Shu Tianliang sneered. He said softly, "This little bastard has come at just the right time. Once we enter the inheritance ground, we'll find an opportunity to kill him. Yes. I definitely won't let this kid go. However, Elviatao and Luo Xing are both here right now. It's not the right time to act. The 5 ancient inheritances will appear in a moment. Once Elviatao and Luo Xing have chosen their inheritances, we'll act. Let's see where this little bastard can escape to this time." The corners of Zhu Kai's mouth curled into a sinister smile. Now, he couldn't wait to kill the calm Zhuo Wen in front of him. Zhuo Wen smiled and nodded towards Qing Lian. His gaze swept past the 8 people and finally stopped at the nearby Shu Tianliang and Zhu Kai, who had ill intentions. The corners of his mouth could not help but curl up. He did not need to guess to know what Zhu Kai and Shu Tianliang were talking about. They were probably discussing how to kill him in the inheritance ground. "All right. It saves me the trouble of finding the 2 of you. Don't blame me for being merciless when the time comes," Zhuowen softly muttered. He calmly arrived in front of the 9 people. His expression was calm and indifferent. Zhuo Wen's arrival caused the originally expressionless Elviatao to slowly stand up. His sharp gaze glanced at Zhuo Wen as he nodded his head slightly. After which, he loudly said, "Since the 10 of you are all here, everyone should take out their respective inheritance keys. Only by gathering all 10 inheritance keys can the stone door be opened. The ancient inheritance will also appear once again." Chapter 543. Opening the Land of Inheritance now, everyone, please take out your respective inheritance keys. Elviatao stood tall as his indifferent eyes slowly scanned the surrounding people. His calm and solemn voice gently reverberated in the surroundings like a whistling breeze. At the same time, Elviatao did not hesitate to take out the inheritance keys that were suffused with white light. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The remaining 9 people did not have any objections as they all took out their respective inheritance keys. The instant the 10 inheritance keys finally appeared together, a dazzling white light gradually rose like the sun, causing the 10 people to involuntarily narrow their eyes. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He only felt that the surface of the key lying in his palm had become incomparably hot. It trembled slightly and actually directly left his hand and rushed towards the sky. The situation of the remaining 9 people was not much different. 10 rays of light rushed out from the hands of the 10 people and transformed into 10 fine light pillars. It was a rather spectacular sight. Finally, the 10 light pillars gathered and transformed into 2 light balls that shot towards the forehead of the 2 huge stone statues on both sides of the stone door. Rumble. The moment the ball of light entered the statue, it suddenly began to move. Its pillar-like feet stomped on the ground, causing the entire earth to tremble. The ground within a radius of nearly 10,000 miles began to crack inch by inch, forming spiderweb-like cracks. The 10 people in front of the stone door were slightly startled. They all unleashed their movement techniques and dodged this powerful trembling force in advance. One by one, they lifted their heads and stared at the 2 huge stone statues on both sides of the stone door as a trace of surprise appeared on their faces. They actually moved. Why are these 2 stone statues so strange? Zhuowen frowned slightly. He also avoided the surrounding tremors and stopped at a corner. His eyes were filled with fear as he looked at the 2 huge stone statues on both sides of the stone door. These 2 stone statues were extremely powerful and gave him an irresistible pressure. He knew that it was likely that none of the 10 people present was a match for these 2 stone statues. The 10 inheritance keys have appeared. The ancient land of inheritance has opened. A vast and misty voice suddenly sounded in this area. It was like rolling thunder that shook one's eardrums continuously. Boom. The instant this voice sounded, the 2 stone statues that had suddenly moved once again moved. The huge spears in their hands were simultaneously thrown at the huge stone door in the middle. Capture. The huge stone door that stood between the heavens and the earth was pierced by the 2 long spears that were like pillars that supported the heavens. Terrifying and dense cracks appeared on the surface of the door, and in the end, it directly shattered into pieces. After shattering the stone door, The two stone statues retracted their arms and stood motionless on both sides of the broken stone door. At this moment, the land of succession was finally opened. Go. The 10 people outside the stone door exchanged glances with each other. A fiery hot expression surfaced in their eyes. Immediately, they turned into 10 black figures that rushed towards the already shattered stone door. In an instant, they disappeared from the entrance. The moment the stone door shattered, the entire magnificent Origin Chi Tower actually began to violently shake. A vast and ancient aura slowly flowed out from within. On the platform at the peak of the second level of the Yuan Chi Tower, all the leaders of the various factions also felt the abnormality of the Yuan Chi Tower, and a trace of astonishment appeared in their eyes. What's going on? Why is the Essence Tower shaking all of a sudden? Could it be that something happened in the ruins of the 4th floor? Voices of astonishment continuously sounded out on the platform. Everyone was puzzled by the sudden shaking of the Yuan Chi Tower. 10 inheritance keys have appeared. The land of succession has opened. The vast and ethereal voice sounded out once again. This time, it was like 10,000 bolts of lightning. From the 4th floor of the Yuan Chi Tower, from top to bottom, the rumbling sound spread out and reverberated in everyone's ears. Lu Nantian slightly raised his head, and a trace of excitement appeared in his eyes. The land of succession of the 4th floor of the Yuan Chi Tower had finally opened. The outcome of who would obtain the ancient inheritance would be revealed very soon. The instant the heavy voice spread out, except for the 10 people who had already entered the land of succession, everyone was sent out of the Yuan Chi Tower. Before the leaders of the various factions on the platform could react, they were wrapped in a pillar of light. When the white light faded, they discovered that they were actually on the huge platform in the middle of the 4 large squares outside the Yuan Chi Tower. The other geniuses on the 4th floor of the Yuan Chi Tower were also sent out. Their faces were filled with bewilderment. Obviously, they didn't expect to be sent out so suddenly. The sudden appearance of so many people on the platform immediately attracted the attention of the other people on the 4 large squares. At this time, the remaining city lords and warriors on the 4 large squares were basically eliminated in the first 3 floors of the Yuan Chi Tower. Look. Everyone in the Yuan Chi Tower has basically come out. Does that mean that the result of the 4th floor of the Yuan Chi Tower is out? It shouldn't be yet. Didn't you see that the 5 super geniuses of Muqin County aren't here? That's true. I'm afraid that the competition for the 5 ancient inheritances will be very fierce. It's unrealistic to want the result to come out so quickly. The gazes of everyone in the 4 great squares were gathered on the tall platform. The black mass of people were guessing their own thoughts. Ever since Lu Nantian led the 1,000 city lords into the Yuan Chi Tower, the people outside the tower had no idea what the situation inside was like. They could only obtain some information from the other warriors who had been eliminated. From the words of the warriors who had been eliminated, everyone on the square knew that there was an unprecedented dark horse in this round of the Yuan Chi Tower. That was the genius of the low-level Rattan Armor City, Zhuoan. Originally, the fact that Zhuoan could lead Rattan Armor City into the top 1,000 had already surprised many faction leaders. However, Zhuoan's performance on the 2nd and 3rd floors made everyone somewhat unable to believe their ears. In particular, the city lords on the 4 large squares who hadn't been able to enter the Yuan Chi Tower had faces full of disbelief. This was because they had heard from the warriors who had been eliminated that Zhuoan ranked first in the 3rd floor of the trial. He had directly surpassed the number 1 genius of Muqin County, Lu Itao. As soon as this bombshell news spread, everyone outside the Yuan Chi Tower boiled over. Who was Lu Itao? He was the number 1 genius of the House of Marquis Qin and was ranked 15th on the Green Emperor leaderboard. However, such an unattainable genius was actually no match for Zhuoan on the 3rd floor of the trial. Suddenly, everyone felt that there was something wrong with their worldview. They secretly cursed Zhuoan for being too abnormal. In an instant, not only did Zhuoan's name spread around the Yuan Chi Tower, but it even spread throughout the entire county. Countless factions in the county already knew that a genius named Zhuoan had appeared in the Yuan Chi Tower battle and had even surpassed Lu Itao in one of the trials. On the high platform, Lu Nantian looked at the dense crowd around him and frowned. He waved his right hand and a powerful force surged out. Some of the unrelated people around him were instantly sent flying back to their respective squares by this force. In just an instant, nearly 1,000 people on the high platform were pushed back to the 4 large squares by Lunanshan's force. Only 9 people remained on the high platform. 5 of them were the leaders of the 5 super factions. The other 4 were Ling Tian City's City Lord, Ling Tian, Rattan Armor City's City Lord, Jiu Tian, Roaring Tiger City's City Lord, He Hu, and Luo Ying City's City Lord, Luo Cheng. The reason these 4 people remained on the high platform was naturally because there were geniuses from their respective cities who had entered the Legacy Land. Thus, they had the qualifications to stand on the high platform. After such a long period of competition, the Yuan Qi Tower battle is finally coming to an end. At this moment, 10 people have already obtained the legacy keys on the 4th floor of the Yuan Qi Tower and have opened the stone door to the Legacy Land. Who among these 10 people will obtain 5 ancient legacies? The results will be revealed very soon. LV Nanshan's voice was as calm and dignified as usual. He gently waved his right hand and instantly, a vast amount of energy gushed out. Once again, a gigantic light screen appeared in the air. The light screen in the air was densely engraved with the names of all the cultivators who had participated in the Yuan Qi Tower battle. At a glance, there were hundreds of thousands of names. They were so densely packed that they looked like countless insects. After all the cultivators who had participated in the Yuan Qi Tower battle had an identity medallion. This light screen recorded the information obtained from the identity medallions on the cultivators. On the light screen, almost all the cultivators' names were grey. However, there were 10 names that were still emitting a dazzling brilliance. Everyone knew that these 10 names were the 10 people who had finally entered the Legacy Land. At the same time, they were geniuses who had stood out from hundreds of thousands of geniuses. They were geniuses who had both strength and luck. LV Itao, Luo Xing, Zhu Kai, Xu Tianliang, Qin Batian, Zhu Owen, Qing Lian, Ling Wushuang, Qinghu, Luo Yao. 10 glittering names. At this moment, in everyone's eyes, they were as dazzling as small suns. The final battle is coming. I wonder who will obtain the 5 ancient legacies in the Legacy Land. I'm afraid it will be the 5 super geniuses. After all, among these 10 people, no one is a match for the 5 super geniuses. In my opinion, there is no suspense in the final result. That's not necessarily true. Have you forgotten about the biggest dark horse in this year's Yuan Qi Tower battle, Zhu Owen? He is an existence that has surpassed LV Itao in the 3rd floor of the Zhongling Mountain. Perhaps he can obtain one of the ancient legacies. That Zhu Owen's potential is indeed strong. However, there is an insurmountable gap between his strength and the 5 super geniuses. It will be difficult for him to obtain one of the ancient legacies. Looking at the 10 glittering names on the light screen, the eyes of everyone in the 4 plazas were incomparably fanatical. Everyone wanted to know who the 5 ancient legacies would belong to. Chapter 544. 5 Ancient Inheritances. I never imagined that Zhu Owen would actually grow to such an extent. With a faint sigh, the figure faintly shook his head as a bitter smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. If anyone saw this person, they would definitely be able to recognize that he was the number 2 genius of the House of Marquis Qin, LV Yongsheng. Ever since he had been overwhelmingly defeated by Zhu Owen in the Training Mountain, the arrogance on LV Yongsheng's face had long since disappeared. Instead, he had become much more reserved. The crushing defeat at the Training Mountain was a great humiliation to him. It was like a warning to him that there was always someone better than him out there. While the crowd outside the Yuan Qi Tower was in an uproar, 10 figures swiftly rushed towards the center of the inheritance ground on the 4th floor like 10 black lightning bolts. The inheritance ground was not very large, only spanning several thousand miles. For the 10 of them, it was as if they were mere feet away. Thus, the 10 of them quickly arrived at the core area of the inheritance ground. We've arrived. At the very front, LV Itao's indifferent voice suddenly rang out in the ears of the others. Following which, the 10 of them stopped in their tracks. This was a cemetery that spanned several hundred miles. Within the cemetery, tombstones stood crookedly. Most of the tombstones were already badly damaged and had even cracked open. From time to time, strange and eerie wails and howls would sound out from the surroundings, causing this cemetery to appear extremely strange and terrifying. What a strong yin qi! After entering the range of this cemetery, Zhuo Wen suddenly felt a chill on his body. He immediately noticed that a strange yin qi had gathered around him at an unknown time. The yin qi was formless and colorless, yet they were like worms that burrowed into his body through his pores and corroded his blood and energy. Faintly furrowing his brows, Zhuo Wen slightly clenched his right hand. The Ice Saint rune on the back of his hand emitted an almost undetectable white glow. Soon after, the yin qi corroding his body was completely absorbed by the Ice Saint rune on the back of his hand. The Ice Saint rune was the nemesis of yin qi. To the Ice Saint rune, the yin qi was like a clown jumping around. The other 9 also sensed the strangeness of the yin qi in this place. They used the world energy in their bodies to mobilize the surrounding yuan qi, forming a layer of light on the surface of their bodies to block the encroachment of the surrounding yin qi. Among them, Tao, Luo Xing, and the other 2 super geniuses had an easy time dealing with the pervasive yin qi around them. Among them, Qing Lian was Luo Xing's junior sister. Her strength was not high, so Luo Xing naturally helped her resist the surrounding yin qi. Thus, Qing Lian's expression was normal. However, Ling Wushuang and the other 2 were much weaker. The surrounding yin qi caused them to be somewhat flustered. However, they were barely able to resist the corrosion of the yin qi. The sorry state of the trio was naturally seen by Tao and the rest. Among them, Tao and Luo Xing's expressions were calm and they did not have any other peculiar expressions. However, Xu Tianliang, Zhu Kai and Qin Baishan's eyes more or less revealed a trace of disdain and contempt. From their point of view, the talent of these people was indeed not bad. However, this was only in comparison to other geniuses. If they were compared to super geniuses like them, the gap was extremely huge. That little bastard Zhuo Wen is probably not much better than these trash, right? Xu Tianliang muttered maliciously in his heart. Soon after, his gaze shifted towards Zhuo Wen, who was nearby. From his point of view, Zhuo Wen had just undergone 3 world tribulations on Zhongling Mountain. His strength was at most at the initial stage of the 3rd world tribulation. Although such strength could resist the surrounding yin qi, it would be very difficult. However, when Xu Tianliang's gaze focused on Zhuo Wen, his expression suddenly froze and his eyelids twitched slightly. This was because he saw that Zhuo Wen was standing on the same spot with a normal expression. There was not the slightest fluctuation of yuan qi on the surface of his body. He did not use any defensive techniques at all. This brat. Xu Tianliang frowned slightly as his expression became rather puzzled. Zhuo Wen's abnormal state was finally noticed by the others. In particular, when they saw that Zhuo Wen did not use any defensive techniques and just stood in the yin qi with a normal expression, they could not help but reveal astonished expressions. Even Tao and Luo Xing glanced at Zhuo Wen in astonishment. It seems that this brat's physical strength is quite strong. He can actually resist the corrosion of the surrounding yin qi. Zhu Kai's scarlet eyes narrowed slightly as he coldly glanced at Zhuo Wen. The corners of his mouth revealed a dangerous arc. Everyone, this is the core area of the inheritance land. The 5 ancient inheritances will soon appear in this area. Whoever obtains the ancient inheritances will have to rely on their own abilities. I believe that no one has any objections, right? Tao said in a clear voice. The other 9 people nodded in succession. Among them, Ling Wushuang and the other 2 looked at each other and smiled bitterly. The 3 of them were considered to be the weakest existences here. It was simply impossible for them to compete with Tao and the other 4 super geniuses. Tao also saw the strange expressions of Ling Wushuang and the others and said indifferently, other than the ancient inheritances, there are naturally other opportunities in the inheritance land. Moreover, there are only 5 ancient inheritances. Therefore, the 5 of you who did not obtain the ancient inheritances can search in the core area. I'm afraid that there are many treasures inside. When Tao said this, Ling Wushuang and the other 2, who were originally smiling bitterly, revealed a relaxed expression. They did not enter the inheritance land to see how Elviatao and the others obtained the ancient inheritances. Instead, they wanted to obtain some benefits inside. Therefore, when they were in the ancient ruins, they fought so desperately for the inheritance key. Since there were other opportunities inside, their trip to the land of inheritance was not in vain. At the same time, Elviatao's right hand pointed in front of him. There was a slight heat in his eyes as he said with a slight fluctuation in his voice, "The blood-colored statue in front is the blood demon inheritance that has always stood in the inheritance land. It is the most powerful and terrifying inheritance in the inheritance land. The blood demon inheritance is not like the other ancient inheritances. If you are unable to pass the trial inside, you will definitely die. However, the other inheritances do not have such a characteristic. Therefore, everyone should act according to their abilities. If you are not strong enough, it is best not to choose the blood demon inheritance." When Elviatao said this, the other 9 people's gazes gathered in the direction his finger was pointing at. At the end of the road, there was a blood-colored statue that was close to 1,000 feet tall. It quietly stood between the heavens and the earth. In front of this statue, Elviatao and the other 9 people were like ants. They were insignificant. The blood-colored statue's appearance was neither human nor beast. It had the body and limbs of a human, but it had the head of a ferocious beast. It could be said that it looked extremely strange and terrifying. Is this the blood demon inheritance? Staring at the huge blood-colored statue with the head of a beast and the body of a human, Zhuowen's eyes flickered. However, there was a trace of hesitation in his heart. This was because Zhuowen's sharp 5 senses could clearly feel the terrifying and threatening aura emitted from the huge blood-colored statue at the end of the road. This aura caused Zhuowen's heartbeat to involuntarily accelerate. It was as if a little deer was pounding against his heart. "Kid, this blood demon inheritance is very dangerous. In my opinion, even if you have the blood demon token and the bronze coffin, I'm afraid that it will not be so easy for you to pass the trial of the blood demon inheritance." At this moment, Xiao Hei's voice suddenly rang out in his mind. At this moment, Xiao Hei's expression was extremely grave. Her gaze towards the blood demon inheritance was filled with dread and fear. However, Zhuowen shook his head and said with a slightly bitter smile, "The arrow is already knocked on the bowstring. I have no choice but to release it. I have already sworn to the heavens that I have to go this time even if I don't want to. Otherwise, I will receive a backlash from the heavens and die without a doubt." In his sea of consciousness, Xiao Hei suddenly became silent for a moment. Then, she sighed softly and said, "When you enter the blood demon inheritance, try to be as careful as possible. This time, it bodes ill rather than well for you. The dangers of this blood demon inheritance are beyond my expectations. I can only take one step at a time." Zhuowen nodded and said no more. The other 9 people's gazes towards the blood demon inheritance were also filled with dread. They were very clear about the terror of this blood demon inheritance. One must know that the peerless genius of the previous Vitality Tower battle, Lu Hantian, also fell because of this blood demon inheritance. From this, one could see how terrifying it was. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, 5 earth-shattering sounds broke through the air, like the pressure of the deep sea, and suddenly resounded in this core area. Then, 5 streams of light suddenly fell from the void, like 5 meteors. Boom! The 5 streams of light instantly smashed into the open space hundreds of meters away from the 10 people. For a moment, the ground cracked and dust filled the air. When the dust gradually dispersed, the 10 people who were hundreds of meters away suddenly saw that on the open space, there were 5 stone statues of different shapes that were hundreds of meters tall. The first stone statue was of a middle-aged man with his hands behind his back and his head raised to look at the void. The stone statue was lifelike and had a surging aura. It was the one with the strongest aura among the 5 stone statues. A stream of light condensed above the middle-aged man's head and turned into a huge golden handwriting, Heaven Stage Sect, Tiangang Sec. Obviously, the golden handwriting should be introducing the inheritance contained in this stone statue. It was the inheritance of a sect called Tiangang Sect from ancient times. Moreover, it was a heaven stage sect and should be one of the higher-ranked sects in ancient times. The second stone statue was of a young girl in a gauze gown. Her aura was no weaker than the middle-aged man's. It was the Heaven Stage sect, Yarochi Immortal Park. The auras of the remaining 3 stone statues were slightly weaker. One of them was a man holding a long sword, one was a strong man with a body as strong as an ox, and the last one was an elegant young man holding a folding fan. These 3 inheritances were of a lower level than the previous 2 stone statues. They were Earth Stage sects, Wind Sword sect, Barbarian Mountain sect, and Carefree Manor. Although their levels were lower than the previous 2 Tiangang sect and Yarochi Immortal Park, their auras were not ordinary. Obviously, the inheritances inside were not weak. Chapter 545. Inheritance Ownership Tiangang Sect, Jade Pool Immortal Park, Wind Sword Sect, Barbarian Mountain Sect, and Carefree Manor. The names of the 5 inheritances appeared in the golden words in the air. 5 drooling auras were continuously emitted from the 5 stone statues. Needless to say, the 10 people present knew that the strength of these 5 inheritances was far beyond their imagination. These inheritances carried the strength of an ancient sect. As long as one had the ability and opportunity to pass through the trial stages, all the resources in the inheritance would belong to one person. One person could obtain all the accumulated resources of a sect. Just thinking about it, one could imagine how great of an opportunity this was. Not only did the inheritances contain an enormous amount of resources, but they also contained a great deal of cultivation experience. These cultivation experiences were perhaps even more important than resources to cultivators. Just think about it. If a cultivator tried to cultivate by himself, he would eventually encounter an insurmountable bottleneck. Some cultivators might even be stuck at a bottleneck for the rest of their lives. This bottleneck was not something that could be solved with sufficient resources. The cultivation experiences of the ancient sects were extremely rich. There were experiences on how to ascend to the level of 4 sovereigns, as well as some taboos for ascension. With these experiences, cultivators would undoubtedly be able to take fewer detours. One had to know that each level of the martial way was more profound than the last. Perhaps it was easy to break through the illusory yin and corporeal yang realms in the early stages, but once one reached the ultimate emperor realm, the difficulty of breaking through was unimaginable. The difficulty of ascending from the ultimate emperor realm to the level of 4 sovereigns was even more terrifying. It was perhaps even more difficult than the entire level of the ultimate emperor realm. This was also why in the vast Muqing County, only Lu Nantian had reached the level of 4 sovereigns. The master of the meteorite, Marquis Baichuan, Marquis Yongxing, and the sect master of the imperial sword sect were all stuck at the level of 9 sovereigns for hundreds of years. They were still unable to advance. This actually showed how difficult it was to ascend to the level of 4 sovereigns. The ancient inheritances contained the experiences of countless cultivators, as well as some taboos and pointers. It was because of these experiences that cultivators would be able to take fewer detours to ascend to the level of 4 sovereigns. It would also become much easier to ascend to the level of 4 sovereigns. Therefore, this kind of experience that could help martial artists break through bottlenecks was the most precious thing in the inheritance. The surroundings were filled with a strange silence. Only the sound of heavy breathing could be heard as the 10 of them stared solemnly at the 5 stone statues in front of them. This strange silence did not last for long. LV Itao, who was the strongest, suddenly moved. LV Itao looked regretfully at the blood demon legacy in front of him. Then, he stomped his foot and transformed into a stream of light. In the next moment, LV Itao was already standing on the back of the middle-aged man's stone statue with his hands behind his back. He leaned over and looked at the remaining 9 people below. His indifferent voice slowly sounded, "Tiangang sect. I, LV Itao, want it. Which one of you wants to compete with me?" When LV Itao said this, the 9 people below, including Zhuoan, all revealed bitter smiles. LV Itao's strength was already at the ultimate 5-wheel emperor realm. With this kind of strength, even if the 9 of them worked together, they might not be a match for LV Itao. Even Zhuoan was far inferior to the current LV Itao. Of course, if he used the bronze coffin and summoned the puppet by Lin, he might be able to fight against Elviatao. However, Zhuowen's target was not the 5 ancient inheritances in front of him. Instead, it was the blood demon legacy in front of him. Naturally, he could not go out and provoke Elviatao. Seeing that the other 9 people below did not move, the corners of Elviatao's mouth curved slightly. After sweeping his gaze across the others, it finally stopped on Zhuowen. Seeing that Zhuowen was a little absent-minded, a trace of surprise appeared on Elviatao's face. Among the 9 people below, Elviatao paid the most attention to Zhuowen. After all, Zhuowen had broken his undefeated legend on Zhongling Mountain and even broke the final record of Zhongling Mountain. That was why he paid so much attention to Zhuowen. Originally, he thought that Zhuowen might come out and compete with him after he chose the most powerful inheritance. However, the reality disappointed him. Not only did Zhuowen not come out, he was even absent-minded. What's wrong with Zhuowen? Looking at him, it seems like he is not interested in the 5 ancient inheritances at all. Muttering in a low voice, Elviatao became more and more puzzled. Zhuowen's unusual attitude could not help but attract his attention. Since Elviatao had the Tiangang sect, the other 9 people did not have the slightest objection. After a while, Luo Xing's jade-like feet gently pushed off the ground and flew towards another heaven stage sect, the Jade Pool Immortal Park, like a fluttering butterfly. Luo Xing, I'm afraid that you might not be able to enjoy the second heaven stage sect's inheritance. Zhu Kai, whose eyes were scarlet, revealed a sinister smile at the corner of his mouth. The sword finger on his right hand pointed at the void. Immediately, a huge blood-red sword that was a few hundred feet long descended from the void and violently blasted towards Luo Xing in the air. As the former number 2 genius of Muqin County, an existence that was only inferior to Elviatao, Zhu Kai was very displeased with Luo Xing, who had risen in recent years and surpassed him in fame to become the new number 2 genius of Muqin County. In his opinion, Luo Xing's strength was not weak, but he might not be much stronger than him. In his opinion, the number 2 genius of Muqin County did not live up to his name. Zhu Kai, I know that you are extremely displeased that I have stolen the title of number 2 genius from you. However, I can clearly tell you that I, Luo Xing, did not ascend to such a high position because of the flattery of outsiders. Luo Xing, who was in the air, raised her head slightly and stared at the huge blood-red sword descending from the void. A cold glint flashed through her beautiful eyes. At this moment, it was time for her to properly display her true strength to prevent Zhu Kai from provoking her all the time. With a wave of her hand, countless hazy starlight immediately burst out from Luo Xing's sleeve, forming a huge spiral nebula in the void. At the same time, a powerful aura that caused the sky to change color violently surged out from Luo Xing's seemingly small body. The air within a radius of several hundred kilometers became restless at this moment. The peak of the ultimate 4-wheel emperor stage? Zhu Kai's pupils shrank to the size of needles the moment this aura burst out from Luo Xing's body. He could not help but cry out in alarm. Shock appeared on the faces of the surrounding people as well. They had never imagined that Luo Xing had concealed her strength so deeply and that her strength had actually reached such a profound level. After all, Luo Xing herself was extremely mysterious. She had only risen to fame in a few years. Although many people regarded her as the strongest person below Elviatao, no one knew Luo Xing's exact cultivation level. They only knew that she had reached the ultimate 4-wheel emperor stage. However, Luo Xing's sudden display of strength at the peak of the ultimate 4-wheel emperor stage naturally shocked many people present. Boom! 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 The huge spiral nebula was like the most powerful meat grinder in the world. The huge blood-red sword in the void slammed into the center of the nebula and was directly torn to shreds by the powerful tearing force within. Zhu Kai grunted when the blood-red sword was destroyed. He could not help but take a few steps back. He stared at Luo Xing, who stood high on the stone statue, with some fear in his eyes. His face was extremely gloomy. Zhu Kai, if you are still unconvinced, you can come up and compete with me for the inheritance of the Jade Pool Immortal Park. Luo Xing stood gracefully on the stone statue's shoulder and looked down at Zhu Kai with her beautiful eyes. Her clear voice slowly reverberated like a lark's. Zhu Kai snorted coldly but did not move at all. Although his strength had reached the intermediate four-wheel emperor stage, he was still 2 small realms away from the peak four-wheel emperor stage. If Luo Xing had been at the advanced four-wheel emperor stage, he would have had the confidence to compete with her. However, Luo Xing had reached the peak of the ultimate four-wheel emperor stage. The strength of a peak four-wheel emperor stage expert was not something he could contend against right now. Luo Xing, you've concealed your strength quite well. You've actually reached the peak of the ultimate four-wheel emperor stage without anyone noticing. Since you have such strength, I won't compete with you. With that, Zhu Kai's eyes turned cold. He stepped forward and directly climbed onto the stone statue of the Wind Sword sect. He was an expert of the sword, so choosing the Wind Sword sect was naturally the most appropriate choice. After Zhu Kai made his choice, Xu Tianliang and Qin Batian looked at each other and made their own choices. Qin Batian naturally chose the Barbarian Mountain sect stone statue while Xu Tianliang chose the Carefree Manor. Whoosh! However, just as Xu Tianliang was about to approach the stone statue of a youth holding a folding fan, the sound of something breaking through the wind suddenly rang out from behind him. Fierce gusts of wind shot out in all directions like countless hidden weapons. Xu Tianliang also noticed the strange situation behind him. He frowned slightly and twisted his waist. He actually used a strange posture to forcefully adjust his direction, just barely dodging the hidden weapon that was shooting towards him from behind. Clang! The sound of metal clashing suddenly rang out, and the sound of something breaking through the air swept past Xu Tianliang's ears. A black shadow shot directly into the chest of the young man holding a folding fan in front of him. Sparks flew in all directions, and it was directly nailed to the chest of the stone statue. Only then did Xu Tianliang notice that the thing that had shot towards him from behind was actually a ferocious-looking bone spear. He also recognized this bone spear. It was called the tyrannical dragon scale bone spear, and it was Zhuowen's weapon. Zhuowen, you little bastard, you actually dare to sneak attack me from behind. After thoroughly recognizing the bone spear, the veins on Xu Tianliang's forehead suddenly popped out. He did not expect that before he could find trouble with Zhuowen, this brat would actually dare to sneak attack him from behind. This instantly caused Xu Tianliang to fly into a rage. Gently tapping the air, Xu Tianliang's cold gaze shifted downwards and landed on the crowd below. He wanted to see who exactly gave this Zhuowen the courage to openly provoke him. However, what caused him to be stunned was that there was not even the slightest trace of Zhuowen's figure in the crowd below. Following which, another sound of something breaking through the wind rang out from behind him, and a clear voice rang out beside his ears. Xu Tianliang, are you looking for me? No need to look, I'm right behind you. Narrowing his eyes, Xu Tianliang suddenly tilted his head, only to see Zhuowen's entire body covered in a golden glow. A fist grew larger and larger in his eyes, directly smashing into his chest. Poochie. Chapter 546. Against Xu Tianliang rumble. An earth-shattering tremor resounded across the land. Soon after, everyone was stunned as they discovered that Xu Tianliang had been miserably smashed into the ground, creating a deep pit that was several meters deep. Shifting their gazes upwards, everyone's gazes landed on the figure that had landed on the young man's statue as shock filled their eyes. They never imagined that Xu Tianliang would be knocked to the ground by Zhuowen right from the start. From the looks of it, he did not even have the strength to resist. Tao, Luo Xing, Zhu Kai and Qin Batian on the other 4 stone statues were also astonished as they looked towards Zhuowen, who was standing on the Carefree Manor's stone statue. They never expected that Zhuowen would actually suddenly take action. What was even more inconceivable was that Xu Tianliang, one of the 5 super geniuses, was actually unable to dodge Zhuowen's attack. Instead, he was directly knocked to the ground, cutting an extremely sorry figure. Zhuowen's strength has increased again. Luo Xing's cherry lips slightly parted as she softly muttered. Tao, who had been indifferent all this while, stared at Zhuowen with a hint of fighting spirit in the depths of his eyes. The stronger Zhuowen's performance was, the higher his expectations of the latter would be. Unknowingly, he had already regarded Zhuowen as his true opponent. On the other hand, Qin Batian's expression was extremely complicated. His strength was not much different from Xu Tianliang's. He knew that if he had exchanged places with Xu Tianliang, his situation would not have been any better than Xu Tianliang's. The pupils of Zhu Kai, who was wearing blood-red clothes and carrying a blood-red sword on his back, shrunk slightly. His gaze was filled with coldness as he stared at Zhuo Wen. Clearly, Zhuo Wen's performance had exceeded his expectations. Humph. Xu Tianliang is not so easy to deal with. Zhu Kai coldly snorted but did not take any action. He was very clear about Xu Tianliang's strength. If not for Zhuo Wen's surprise attack, Xu Tianliang would not have ended up in such a sorry state. However, since Zhuo Wen was able to succeed in his sneak attack, his strength should not be too weak. Let these two guys fight for a round first. Even if Xu Tianliang is defeated, Zhuo Wen will probably be exhausted. When the time comes, I only need to make a slight move, and that little bastard Zhuo Wen won't be able to escape the fate of death. Zhu Kai's eyes flickered as he silently calculated in his heart. Since Zhuo Wen had already clashed with Xu Tianliang, he would naturally not foolishly charge forward. He would first sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. In the end, he might even be able to reap the benefits. Zhuo Wen, you little bastard, you actually dared to sneak attack me. Boom. The ground cracked, and within the deep pit, an aura continuously swelled like a wave. Dust was suddenly torn apart, revealing a faintly discernible figure. Xu Tianliang's face was slightly pale, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. At this moment, his gaze was extremely gloomy as he stared at Zhuo Wen, who was holding a spear with both hands on the stone statue. His heart was filled with astonishment. Even though Zhuo Wen had launched a sneak attack on him, he had secretly used the strength within his body to defend himself at the last moment. However, he had still been hit by Zhuo Wen's punch until his blood boiled and he ended up in such a sorry state. Zhuo Wen's strength was not at the initial stage of the Ultimate Emperor stage. He was at least at the advanced stage of the Ultimate Emperor stage. No wonder this little bastard dared to provoke me. It turns out that his strength is not weak. However, today, I will completely cripple you. With this thought in mind, Xu Tianliang suddenly took a step forward. An even more powerful aura surged out like a hurricane. The strength of his aura had reached the peak of the Ultimate Emperor stage. It looks like Xu Tianliang is truly furious. He has actually revealed his aura without holding back. Zhuo Wen is probably in for it. The few people left on the ground all shook their heads and sighed inwardly when they sensed Xu Tianliang's powerful aura. Even a sliver of worry appeared on Qing Lian's pretty face. After all, Xu Tianliang was one of the 5 super geniuses. His strength was one of the best in the entire Muqin County. Although Zhuo Wen's talent was astonishing, he was still not very strong. It would be a little difficult for him to go up against Xu Tianliang. However, Ling Wushuang's eyes shone brightly. Perhaps others did not know Zhuo Wen's true strength, but she had personally experienced Zhuo Wen's great strength. Back in the Falling Star sect, the figure that had instantly killed the bald youth and shattered the restriction outside the spatial stone tablet was still vivid in her mind. That figure gradually overlapped with the spear-wielding figure on the stone statue in her mind. Ling Wushuang knew that the unlucky one in this battle would not be Zhuo Wen. Instead, it might be Xu Tianliang. When Xu Tianliang unleashed the aura of a peak Ultimate Emperor without holding back, the faces of the other 4 super geniuses on the stone statue changed. Zhuo Wen is in for it. Zhu Kai licked his lips and smiled cruelly. LV Yitao and Luo Xing were calm as they silently watched Zhuo Wen and Xu Tianliang face off in the distance. LV Yitao's sharp eyes revealed a sliver of anticipation. He wanted to see if Zhuo Wen could be Xu Tianliang's opponent. If Zhuo Wen was not even as strong as Xu Tianliang, then perhaps he had overestimated Zhuo Wen. Zhuo Wen was not worthy of his attention. Zhuo Wen stood proudly on the stone statue. He lowered his head and quietly stared at Xu Tianliang, whose aura surged like the sea. There was not the slightest change in Zhuo Wen's eyes, only the usual calmness. It was as if the aura that erupted from Xu Tianliang was nothing in his eyes. Xu Tianliang, since I dare to challenge you, it's not because I'm arrogant, but because... As he spoke, Zhuo Wen suddenly stomped his foot, and an aura that was vast like the sea and was practically not inferior to Xu Tianliang similarly shot out explosively from Zhuo Wen's body. The air behind him even started to boil and roil, forming numerous terrifying gales. "It's because I already have the strength to challenge you." As soon as he said that, Zhuo Wen's aura reached its peak, instantly suppressing the aura released by Xu Tianliang. Everyone present was shocked. A peak ultimate emperor? To think that Zhuowen also possesses such strength. No wonder Zhuowen dares to challenge Xu Tianliang. Below the stone statue, with the exception of Ling Wushuang, the faces of the others were filled with shock. Evidently, the aura that Zhuowen had suddenly displayed had truly shocked them. They also knew that the reason why Zhuowen dared to provoke Xu Tianliang was not because he was arrogant, but because he had solid strength. The other 4 super geniuses on the stone statues were also visibly moved. Clearly, they had not expected Zhuowen to advance so quickly. After all, Zhuowen had only just passed the tribulation of heaven and earth when he was at Zhongling Mountain, and had reached the ultimate emperor stage not too long ago. He had actually advanced by leaps and bounds in such a short period of time, reaching the peak of the ultimate emperor stage. Such speed was truly terrifying. The indifferent LV Itao nodded slightly, a look of anticipation in his eyes. Luo Xing's beautiful eyes were complicated, Zhu Kai's expression was gloomy, and Qin Baishan's face was filled with shock. The 4 of them had different expressions. When Xu Tianliang sensed that Zhuowen's aura was not weaker than his own, his face twitched. Clearly, he was also shocked by Zhuowen's cultivation speed, and his face became extremely gloomy. "Humph. No wonder you were able to reach the peak of Zhongling Mountain. Your potential is indeed terrifying, but if you want to defeat me, perhaps you're still not qualified." Xu Tianliang's expression became extremely solemn. With a cold snort, he stepped on the void and instantly reached the other end of the stone statue. At the same time, his right hand pointed at the void behind him. Countless primordial qi condensed in the void, and the world was boiling. Underworld shadow finger. One finger shakes the heavens and earth. Rip. A crack suddenly appeared in the void, and a giant black finger that was hundreds of feet long swept out from the crack. It was like a huge mountain, and directly descended on the forest. For a moment, the world changed color. It seems that Xu Tianliang has felt the threat from Zhuowen. He actually used the most powerful forbidden technique of the Marquis of Baichuan's mansion, the underworld shadow finger. On the other 4 stone statues, LV Itao and the other 3 were astonished after seeing Xu Tianliang use such a terrifying forbidden technique as the dark shadow finger right from the start. Rumble. The giant black finger that was hundreds of feet long, like a mountain, slowly descended above Zhuowen's head. Wherever it passed, the space was completely shattered into powder, forming black holes. Looking at the giant black finger in the sky, Zhuowen's gaze was extremely calm. Back in the dark forest, he was still fleeing pathetically under Xu Tianliang's pursuit. But now, he had unknowingly made Xu Tianliang feel a great threat. "I'm afraid that the first move of the underworld shadow finger is not enough." The corners of Zhuowen's mouth were filled with a sneer. He suddenly tightened his grip on the dragon-scale tyrannical bone spear, and the spear was tilted from top to bottom. His right foot was in front of him, and the tip of his foot was pushed forward. An incomparably powerful aura swept out. At this moment, it was as if Zhuowen and the dragon-scale tyrannical bone spear had become one. "Advance and the dragon will regret. Retreat and the vine will grow. Ascending dragon style, break for me." As soon as these words came out, a giant dragon head that was hundreds of feet long descended from the void behind Zhuowen. Its aura was not the slightest bit weaker than the giant black finger above Xu Tianliang. Boom. 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 In just an instant, the giant black finger and the giant dragon head collided with a loud bang. Monstrous waves of explosions rang out incessantly, and boundless waves of air rolled out. With the 2 of them at the epicenter, the space within a few 100-mile radius completely collapsed at this moment. The 4 super geniuses on the other stone statues that were closest to them all used their own defensive techniques and easily blocked the ripples that surged after this. However, Ling Wushuang and the other 3 below the stone statues were in a much more miserable state. They continuously retreated, and only after retreating a few hundred steps did they barely manage to withstand the powerful ripples that swept over. Slightly raising their heads, they stared at the two figures standing at the center of the explosion with terrified expressions. They had never imagined that the battle between Xu Tianliang and Zhuowen would actually be so terrifying. They had finally experienced the enormous gap between themselves and such exceptional geniuses. Zhuowen. It's not over yet. Dark Nether Finger second style. Second finger weeps ghosts and gods. Die. Chapter 547. Three fingers shaking the universe suddenly, Xu Tianliang let out a low shout and pointed his second finger at the void behind him. Once again, an even bigger hole was torn open. From that huge hole, a black finger that was nearly 1,000 feet long slowly stretched out. The strange thing was that the surface of this even larger black finger was actually filled with a dense ink-black fog. Countless ghostly faces were faintly discernible within the fog, while frightening ear-piercing howls continuously reverberated throughout the area. This was the second move of the Dark Shadow Finger, second finger weeping ghosts and gods. Zhuowen had seen this move before in the Dark Forest. Its power was indeed extraordinary. At that time, Zhuowen had been put in an extremely difficult position by this move. However, things were different now. In the face of this gigantic finger filled with ghostly howls, Zhuowen's expression was calm. Whoosh! A cold glint arrives first, then the spear strikes like a dragon. Crouching dragon, come! Zhuowen's right hand tightened around the spear's hilt. The spear's momentum didn't change. He suddenly swung the bone spear and immediately executed the second move of the tyrannical dragon-scale spear, the crouching dragon. Instantly, a dragon's roar filled the sky. A huge coiling dragon slowly appeared with Zhuowen at its center. Zhuowen could even see the sinister dragon scales on the coiling dragon's body. Under the reflection of the light, they appeared dazzling and glaring. The crouching dragon was the only defensive move of the tyrannical dragon-scale spear's 4 moves. Previously, Zhuowen had relied on this move to forcefully withstand the combined attacks of 30 to 40 cultivators. The second move of the Dark Shadow Finger was indeed terrifying, but the crouching dragon that Zhuowen executed wasn't weak either. The gigantic finger instantly slammed into the coiled dragon. Countless balls of light continuously exploded. The coiled dragon roared at the sky. There were faint signs of collapse on its surface, but it still managed to hold on in the end. The second move of the Dark Shadow Finger had been barely resisted by the crouching dragon. What? This little bastard actually managed to block it. Xu Tianliang's pupils shrank as a trace of shock appeared in his eyes. He hadn't expected Zhuowen to be able to block the second move of the Dark Nether Finger. After all, the second move of the Dark Nether Finger was much more powerful than the first move. It was enough to threaten a peak 3-wheel Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator. Although Zhuowen was barely able to resist the attack, he didn't seem to have suffered much damage. Xu Tianliang. Prepare to die. With a shake of the bone spear, the broken coiling dragon around him suddenly turned into countless motes of light. At some point, 2 pairs of massive thunder wings had appeared on Zhuowen's back. With a single step, he turned into an illusory shadow of thunder. With a flash of lightning, Zhuowen arrived in front of Xu Tianliang in an instant. He swung the long spear in his hand, and with a terrifying whistling sound, it pierced towards Xu Tianliang's glabella. Xu Tianliang coldly snorted. He patted his Chenkuan bag and took out 2 long black sabers. He slashed the 2 sabers in front of his chest and immediately blocked the bone spear that was thrusting towards him. Clang! 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 Sparks flew as crisp sounds rang out continuously. Zhuowen and Xu Tianliang had exchanged dozens of blows in an instant. The sound of metal clashing against metal was ear-piercing and clear. Their speed had practically reached the limit. They were so fast that it was difficult for the naked eye to catch them. Only the sparks from the collision of their weapons could barely be seen. So fast. I really didn't expect their battle to cause such a huge commotion. Below the stone statue, Ling Wushuang and the rest stared blankly at the battle scene in the air. Sparks flew and black shadows danced wildly. Even with their cultivation level, They were actually unable to capture any signs of the battle between the two. They knew that the battle between the two of them had already exceeded the scope of their factions. If any one of them went up, they would be defeated within a few moves. They might even lose their lives. The eyes of the other 4 super geniuses on the remaining 4 stone statues narrowed. Their expressions were focused on the 2 people who were continuously exchanging blows in the air. With their strength, they were naturally able to clearly capture the trajectory and situation of the exchange between the two. However, what caused them to be somewhat astonished was that Xu Tianliang was actually at a disadvantage. On the other hand, Zhuowen was becoming more and more ferocious. Moreover, a rich golden glow faintly emitted from his body. What was even stranger was that the more intense the golden glow emitted from Zhuowen's body became, the more powerful his strength became. On the other hand, Xu Tianliang was becoming more and more strenuous. Xu Tianliang is about to be defeated. Yatao's eyes were like torches as his calm voice slowly sounded out. With his strength and insight, he could instantly tell that Xu Tianliang was about to be defeated. In a few moves, Xu Tianliang would likely be completely defeated. When Luo Xing, Zhu Kai, and Qin Batian heard this, a complicated expression surfaced on their faces. They did not expect that Xu Tianliang, who was one of the 5 super geniuses along with them, would actually be defeated by Zhuowen, a brat who was initially unknown. This brat's growth is too fast. There must be some secret on his body. Perhaps, he might have obtained some benefits at the peak of Zhongling Mountain. Such a secret must be in my hands. Seeing that Xu Tianliang had fallen into a disadvantage, Zhu Kai's scarlet eyes narrowed slightly. The depths of his eyes were unknowingly filled with dense killing intent. He was very clear that Zhuowen's cultivation speed was very likely related to the peak of Zhongling Mountain. If he was able to obtain the secret on the former's body, perhaps his cultivation speed would also soar. He would definitely be able to surpass Luo Xing, who was suppressing him. When he thought of himself being able to surpass the arrogant Luo Xing, a trace of perverted pleasure flashed across Zhu Kai's eyes. The gaze he used to look at Zhuowen was filled with even more hope and desire. Clang! Another exchange occurred. Instantly, countless sparks flew as strength chi swirled in the air. Countless cyclones enveloped the 2 figures. With a muffled groan, a figure suddenly flew out. Everyone looked over and was shocked to discover that the figure that flew out was none other than Xu Tianliang. At this moment, Xu Tianliang looked exhausted, his hair was in a mess, his face was sinister, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. His face was devoid of blood, and he retreated a few hundred steps in the air. He stomped his feet in the air and barely managed to stop his body from retreating. This Zhuowen. How did he become so strong? At this moment, Xu Tianliang's hands that were holding onto the 2 black blades were trembling slightly. The web between his thumb and index finger was cracked and blood flowed endlessly. Just now, he had exchanged many blows with Zhuowen. Every time they collided, he felt as if a mountain was pressing down on his weapon, causing his hands to feel numb. Moreover, as the golden light in Zhuowen's body became more vigorous, the pressure also became heavier. During the battle, Zhuowen's strength was constantly increasing. It was not the strength of Yuan Li, but a type of pure physical strength. Obviously, Zhuowen had cultivated an extremely terrifying body-refining technique. Xu Tianliang was actually repelled. Could it be that Zhuowen's strength is so strong that even Xu Tianliang is no match for him? When Ling Wushuang and the others below the stone statue saw Xu Tianliang's miserable appearance, they all revealed shocked expressions. In the sky, Zhuowen gently flicked his finger on the tip of the spear. A clear and melodious buzzing sound slowly reverberated across this stretch of the world. Soon after, Zhuowen raised his head slightly. His gaze was indifferent as he looked towards Xu Tianliang, who was a short distance away. Xu Tianliang. Now, I'm no longer that small fry who was chased by you in the dark forest and had to flee in a sorry state. Today, your life, I, Zhuowen, will be taking it. An indifferent voice slowly spread out from Zhuowen's mouth. Following which, Zhuowen fiercely stomped his foot. Lightning shot out and in an instant, he appeared in front of Xu Tianliang. The long spear in his right hand flicked, bringing with it a swift and fierce wind as it unscrupulously swept out. Kill me. Zhuowen, you are not qualified. At this moment, Xu Tianliang's eyes revealed a trace of hesitation. However, after looking at the aggressive Zhuowen in front of him, his eyes revealed a trace of ruthlessness. At this moment, Xu Tianliang straightened his spine and stomped his foot once again. A terrifying aura burst out from his body. Following which, Xu Tianliang pointed his finger once again. Instantly, countless auras gathered and the heavens and the earth changed color. I really didn't expect that you would be able to force me to use the third finger of the Dark Shadow Finger. This is the most powerful finger of the Dark Shadow Finger. Zhuowen, if you die under this finger in the end, you can be proud. Xu Tianliang's sinister voice reverberated throughout the heavens and the earth. Yuan Qi within a few thousand miles frantically gathered in the void behind Xu Tianliang, directly transforming into a huge spiral-shaped black hole. Rip! The sound of glass shattering rang out. The black hole actually shattered into fine powder. A huge black finger that was tens of thousands of feet long slowly descended from the shattered void like a monstrous black dragon. At this moment, Xu Tianliang was surrounded by black qi. His long hair fluttered in the wind and his eyes were filled with malevolence. He had personally experienced the terror of the third finger of the Dark Shadow Finger. This move could already threaten an ultimate four-wheel emperor. Zhuowen in front of him was only at the peak of the ultimate three-wheel emperor realm. Therefore, in his opinion, Zhuowen was doomed under the third finger of the Dark Shadow Finger. Third move of the Dark Shadow Finger, 3 fingers shake the universe. Under the huge finger, Xu Tianliang's voice rang out word by word. When the last word was uttered, his right finger suddenly swung downwards. Instantly, the huge finger covered the sky as it fell towards Zhuowen. When Xu Tianliang used the third finger of the Dark Shadow Finger, Elviatao, Luo Xing, Zhu Kai and Qin Batian were all shocked. The Dark Shadow Finger was a famous forbidden technique of the Baichuan Marquis residence. Naturally, they knew it like the back of their hands. The Dark Shadow Finger had a total of 3 moves, and each move was more terrifying than the last. The power of the third move, in particular, had completely reached the level of collapsing heaven and earth and shattering mountains and rivers. Furthermore, Xu Tianliang had only grasped the basics of the third finger. He hadn't mastered it at all. Although the power displayed by the third finger was impressive, the backlash was extremely terrifying. Xu Tianliang had clearly been forced into a corner by Zhuowen, which was why he had used the third finger of the Dark Shadow Finger in the end. Zhuowen, you must die now. You forced me to use the third finger of the Dark Shadow Finger. If you don't die, I won't be able to rest easy. At this moment, Xu Tianliang's face was as pale as snow as he glared at Zhuowen below. Chapter 548. Four-color lotus. The huge black finger in the sky posed too much of a threat to Zhuowen. Therefore, Zhuowen didn't dare be careless. He immediately took out the only 4 types of earth flames in his body. The Cyan 3000 green lotus flame, the blue 9 heavens thunder flame, the star-filled star flame, and the strange blood flame. 4 different colored earth flames surrounded Zhuowen in layers, causing the temperature of the air to soar to an unimaginable level. Earth fire. And 4 types of earth fire at that. Ling Wushuang and the others also felt the sudden increase in temperature around them. When they saw the 4 different colored earth fires around Zhuowen's body, their expressions became very interesting. One had to know that earth flames were extremely rare and terrifying. Being able to encounter one type of earth flame was already a great fortune. However, Zhuowen had actually brought out 4 types of earth flames at once. This caused them to be inexplicably shocked. Even Elviatao, Luo Xing, and the other 3 people on the stone statues were moved when they saw the 4 types of earth fires around Zhuowen. It's said that Zhuowen's talent in mental strength is even more terrifying than his martial arts. But no matter how terrifying it is, isn't it a little too abnormal to be able to control 4 types of earth fire at once? Qin Batian, who had remained silent all this while, had his mouth agape, unable to conceal the shock on his face. 4 types of earth fire is indeed terrifying. However, compared to Xu Tianliang's third dark underworld finger, the difference is not just a little. Even if this Zhuowen releases 4 types of earth fire, it is still impossible for him to block that 10,000 feet long giant finger. However, Zhu Kai shook his head. He looked at Zhuowen as if he was looking at a dead man. In his opinion, no matter what, Zhuowen would not be able to escape death. In his heart, he was already planning on how to snatch the Chenkuan bag from Zhuowen's waist as soon as possible after Zhuowen's death. He was very curious. What was the secret behind Zhuowen's cultivation speed? And what kind of benefits did he obtain from Zhongling Mountain? I don't think so. For Zhuowen to be able to suppress Xu Tianliang to such an extent, I'm afraid that he also has a powerful trump card. This third dark underworld finger might not be able to kill Zhuowen. Luo Xing's beautiful eyes flashed slightly as she opened her mouth to speak. The feeling that Zhuowen gave her had always been as hazy and mysterious as a veil. She naturally did not believe that Zhuowen would be defeated by Xu Tianliang just like that. Hee. Could it be that the number one beauty of our prefecture is interested in a brat like Zhuowen who stinks of milk? It seems that your taste is quite unique. You actually like this kind of gigolo? Seeing that it was Luo Xing who spoke, Zhu Kai grinned, his words full of sarcasm. Although Luo Xing was indeed stronger than him, he was still not convinced of Luo Xing's strength, so his words were not polite at all. Luo Xing indifferently glanced at Zhu Kai and indifferently said, "The number one genius of the Imperial Sword Sect is only SOSO. All you can do is talk big. If you are not convinced of my strength, we can see the real deal." Hearing this, Zhu Kai's face twitched. Luo Xing's strength was much higher than his. If he were to fight with Luo Xing, needless to say, it would be a one-sided battle. Therefore, Zhu Kai immediately fell silent. He was really afraid that Luo Xing would fly into a rage out of humiliation and attack him. Seeing that Zhu Kai did not speak, a trace of disdain flashed across Luo Xing's beautiful eyes. She shook her head and did not want to argue with Zhu Kai. Haha. Zhuowen, I never thought that you would have 4 types of earth fire on you. However, even if you have 4 types of earth fire, their power is not enough to threaten the third dark underworld finger. You should just obediently accept your death. Xu Tianliang laughed loudly as he looked at Zhuowen with an attitude of looking at a dead man. Zhuowen did not pay attention to Xu Tianliang's provocation. Instead, he silently operated the secret spirit skill fire melting art that he had obtained from the tattered cloth. At that time, he was already able to use the fire melting art to fuse 3 types of refining flames. However, the process of fusing 4 types of refining flames was extremely difficult and terrifying. Moreover, with the strength of his body at that time, it was really difficult for him to withstand the backlash of the 4 types of refining flames. Therefore, Zhuowen had not successfully fused 4 types of refining flames until now. However, since the trip to Zhongling Mountain, Zhuowen had unknowingly cultivated the nirvana of the Great Sun to the entry level. All 365 acupuncture points in his body had been opened. The strength of his body was much stronger than before. Therefore, he was no longer afraid of the backlash of the 4 types of refining flames. At this moment, he wanted to see just how powerful the 4 types of refining flames were. Would it be able to withstand the third dark underworld finger? Whoosh! A vast mind power that was as vast as the sea instantly swept out from Zhuowen's Niwen Palace. Then, layer upon layer, it gently enveloped the 4 types of refining flames around Zhuowen and began the process of fusing the 4 types of refining flames. The current Zhuowen, whether it was his mind power or the strength of his body, was much stronger than before. Therefore, it did not take much time for him to control his mind power to fuse the 4 types of refining flames. He succeeded in one go. Boom! The moment the 4 types of refining flames were fused, the surrounding temperature soared again. Ling Wushuang and the others, who were hundreds of meters away, could vaguely feel the heat. They could not help but stare at Zhuowen's figure in amazement. At this moment, the 4 types of refining flames around Zhuowen's body had disappeared without a trace. Instead, they were replaced by 4 types of strange flames that flickered alternately. This strange flame was like a fire python that twined around Zhuowen's body. Its aura was extremely terrifying. This flame. Did Zhuowen fuse the 4 types of refining flames together to create a new type of flame? When everyone saw the 4 types of refining flames around Zhuowen, their eyes revealed a trace of astonishment and shock. They did not expect that Zhuowen had the ability to fuse the 4 types of refining flames together to form an even more powerful flame. How did this guy do it? It's time to test the power of the refining flames. Raising his head, Zhuowen directly faced the huge finger. With a wave of his right hand, the 4-colored refining flames turned into a huge sea of fire and swept towards the huge finger in the sky. Xu Tianliang clearly saw Zhuowen's actions below, especially when he saw Zhuowen fusing 4 types of earth fire to form a 4-colored refining flame. He actually felt a trace of threat from the 4-colored refining flame. The fusion of 4 types of refining flames. Looks like this is your final trump card. Then I'll crush this trump card of yours. Xu Tianliang shouted in a low voice. His extended finger slowly fell. The huge finger finally blasted on the refining flames that soared into the sky. Rumble. A series of earth-shattering noises rang out continuously. The surrounding space collapsed and collapsed. Countless cyclones were densely packed together and squeezed the surrounding space. What shocked everyone was that the sea of fire formed by the terrifying refining flames actually completely blocked the huge finger. For a moment, the sea of fire and the huge finger were in a silent stalemate in the air. No one was willing to give way to the other. Blocked. The refining flames created by Zhuowen are actually so powerful. Even the 3rd finger of the dark shadow finger was blocked. Xu Tianliang's pupils shrank. He could not help but exclaim in his heart. A trace of madness appeared on his face. The other onlookers were also stunned by this scene. They all knew how terrifying the 3rd finger of the dark shadow finger was, but even such a terrifying move was blocked by the refining flames. Compared to the shock of the others, Zhuowen's face revealed a trace of a smile. The power of the refining flames was beyond his expectations. The 3rd finger of the dark shadow finger was already powerful enough to threaten a 4-wheel ultimate Emperor Realm expert, but the refining flames were able to block such an attack. Obviously, the refining flames' power was on par with the 3rd finger of the dark shadow finger. Impossible. Zhuowen, you little bastard, die. Xu Tianliang shouted loudly. Looking at the blocked dark underworld finger, his eyes had already become incomparably red. Forcefully enduring the backlash in his body, his right finger once again pointed at the void. The first move of the dark shadow finger, one finger shocks heaven and earth. The second move of the dark shadow finger, 2 fingers weeping ghosts and gods. Break, break, break. As soon as he shouted, 2 more huge fingers appeared in the void. These 2 huge fingers were much smaller than the refining flames, but their power was still not to be underestimated. Poochie. After continuously using the first 2 moves of the dark shadow finger, Xu Tianliang was finally unable to suppress the backlash in his body. A mouthful of blood violently spurted out, and his entire body became incomparably weak. This time, he must kill this little bastard Zhuowen. In the void, the 3 huge fingers stood side by side, and their power suddenly increased by several times. In an instant, they suppressed the refining flames. Suddenly, the endless sea of fire was forced to retreat. It seemed that it did not have enough strength and was on the verge of collapse. Zhuowen's eyes darkened. He did not expect Xu Tianliang to be so difficult to deal with. His eyes flashed. He knew that he would need to use the Icefire holy symbol to create the 4-colored lotus flower to completely suppress the 3 huge fingers in the void. Haha. Zhuowen, let's see what other moves you have to block the 3rd finger of the dark shadow finger. You are dead. Although Xu Tianliang had become extremely weak, he laughed proudly as if Zhuowen had already died in front of him. Die. It's not me who should die, it's you. Zhuowen shook his head. Immediately, the 2 talismans on the back of his hands lit up. Immediately, a chilling Arctic frost burst out from the holy symbol and rushed directly into the void, above the refining flames that were retreating. Then, everyone was shocked to find that the inexplicable blue Arctic chi began to gradually merge with the refining flames the moment it touched them. The fusion did not take long. In just 5 breaths, the 4-colored flames had completely disappeared. What replaced it was a huge 4-colored lotus flower that was about to bloom. It floated quietly in the void. At this time, The 3 huge fingers came one after another and blasted on the 4-colored lotus flower. Then, an earth-shattering explosion sounded. In the void, the lotus flower slowly bloomed, forming a different scene above the void. The originally aggressive 3 huge fingers, 2 of which were relatively weaker, were directly blasted into powder by the explosive power. On the other hand, the 100,000 feet large finger had become extremely tattered and dim. Clearly, it was no longer a threat. Chapter 549. Green binding jade token. From the time the 3 underworld fingers were broken to Xu Tianliang vomiting blood and flying backwards, it was only a blink of an eye. Before many people could even react, Xu Tianliang had already been completely defeated. Xu Tianliang was actually defeated. Xu Tianliang had even used the 3rd finger of the underworld fingers, but he was still defeated. On the Wind Sword Sect stone statue, Zhu Kai's scarlet eyes were tightly fixed on Xu Tianliang's figure as he flew backwards. A trace of shock finally surfaced on his cold face. Zhuowen's cultivation was clearly similar to Xu Tianliang's, but he had actually crushed Xu Tianliang in the end. This had truly caused everyone's jaws to drop. LV Itao, Qin Batian, and Luo Xing's faces finally revealed expressions of shock. As for Ling Wushuang and the rest below the stone statue, they were all dumbfounded. They also did not expect that Xu Tianliang would be defeated in the end. Xu Tianliang, die! At this moment, Zhuowen's face was slightly pale. His feet suddenly stomped, and his entire body turned into a bolt of lightning as he instantly appeared above Xu Tianliang. His right hand grasped the spear's handle, and the bone spear instantly turned into a streak of light as it shot towards Xu Tianliang's chest. Xu Tianliang's face was extremely ugly. He also did not expect that he would actually be defeated, and in such an ugly manner. However, when Xu Tianliang, who was in the air, saw the bone spear and Zhuowen approaching, a trace of a strange smile suddenly appeared on his face. His smile grew wider, and in the end, he laughed heartily. Zhuowen, your strength has indeed exceeded my expectations, but your ending is still death. Amidst his laughter, Xu Tianliang had unknowingly taken out a brilliant jade token from his sleeve. The surface of the jade token emitted a faint fluorescent light. However, when Zhuowen saw the jade token in Xu Tianliang's hand, a strong sense of danger suddenly emerged in his heart. This sense of danger was so strong that it spread to every corner of his body. Although he did not know what the jade token was, he knew that he could not allow Xu Tianliang to activate it. Die! With a low shout, Zhuowen's bone spear accelerated several times in the air. It was only a few inches away from Xu Tianliang's chest. In just half a breath's time, the cold spear tip would be able to pierce through Xu Tianliang's heart. However, just as the bone spear was about to pierce Xu Tianliang's chest, Xu Tianliang suddenly crushed the jade tablet. Immediately, a monstrous green light burst out in all directions. A terrifying surging force heavily bombarded the bone spear. Boom! Boom! The powerful force caused Zhuowen to retreat several hundred meters before he could barely stop himself. He raised his head slightly and looked at the intense green light in front of him in shock. Green binding jade token, bind the world. A sinister voice slowly reverberated from the dazzling green light. Immediately, the green light exploded and turned into countless green threads. Whoosh! 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 The dense green threads were like locusts that covered the sky and the earth as they swept towards Zhuowen. In just an instant, Zhuowen's 4 limbs were entangled by the dense green threads and he could not move at all. Brother Zhu, what are you waiting for? I know that you have been looking for an opportunity to kill in one strike. I have created it for you now. Hurry up and kill that little bastard Zhuowen. The moment Zhuowen was entangled by the countless green threads, Xu Tianliang's slightly hurried voice immediately rang out in his mind. Clearly, Xu Tianliang had secretly transmitted a message to Zhu Kai. Hearing this, Zhu Kai revealed a brilliant smile. At the same time, he was shocked that Xu Tianliang actually had a treasure like the green binding jade token on him. The green binding jade token was a single-use, top-notch grade 4 origin array. Once the green binding jade token was activated, the strange power contained within it would turn into countless thin threads and wrap around the enemy in layers. What was even more amazing was that if an Ultimate Emperor Realm expert was bound by the power of the green binding jade token, it would be very difficult for him to break free. In the end, he would only be at the mercy of others. He. It seems that Shu Tianliang is very determined to kill Zhuowen. He. I will fulfill Shu Tianliang's wish. When the time comes, I will also take Zhuowen's Chenkuan bag. Zhu Kai's eyes flickered as a trace of complacency appeared on his face. He knew that as long as he directly killed Zhuowen and snatched the Chenkuan bag from him, Shu Tianliang would not dare to compete with him. As for LV Atao and Luo Xing, they simply disdained to use this kind of killing and snatching tactic. Thus, the Cosmos sack on Zhuowen's body would definitely be his. As long as he killed Zhuowen, he would be able to easily obtain it. Zhuowen, I, Zhu Kai, will take all of your resources and secrets. You can go on your way with peace of mind. As Zhu Kai muttered in his heart, he suddenly made his move. His hands formed a sword seal, and the blood-red long sword on his back immediately let out a long whistle. With a clang, it was directly unsheathed. Waves of terrifying bloody smell spread throughout the entire space. 10 steps 1 person, sea of blood-red sword. Zhu Kai's right hand pointed to the sky and the unsheathed blood-red sword split into 2, then into 4, forming countless blood-red sword phantoms. For a moment, the entire sky was enveloped by the phantoms of blood-red swords and turned into an endless sea of blood. Zhuowen, die. Zhu Kai's expression was extremely cold. With a light wave of his sword finger pointing to the sky, a sea of countless blood swords, like a bloody storm, directly enveloped Zhuowen, who was bound by countless green threads not far away. At this moment, Zhuowen was completely unaware that Zhu Kai's killing move was gradually brewing. Instead, he frowned as he looked at the dense green threads around his body. Although these green threads looked thin and weak, their hardness greatly exceeded Zhuowen's expectations. No matter how he struggled, he could not break these strange green threads around him. What are these things? Why are they so hard? Feeling the binding feeling from his limbs, Zhuowen frowned. He did not expect Shu Tianliang to have such a trick up his sleeve. Caught off guard, he was directly bound by the green binding jade token. Kid. These green threads are extremely hard. They are not something you can undo right now. Let me try. Suddenly, Xiao He spoke in his mind. Soon after, Zhuowen felt a chill between his eyebrows. A dense ink-black energy swept out from between his eyebrows and shot onto the green threads around his body. Sizzle. The sound of something burning slowly rang out. Zhuowen was pleasantly surprised to find that this ink-black energy could actually directly corrode the strange green threads around him. However, the speed was not very fast. I only need 10 breaths of time to break these green threads on your body. I hope that Shu Tianliang will not use any powerful moves to attack you during this period of time. You should know that the current you has no power to resist. If you are attacked, even if you don't die, you will be seriously injured. Xiao He spoke with a grave expression as she looked down at the green threads on Zhuowen's body. This should be Shu Tianliang's last resort. After all, he forcefully used 3 underworld yin fingers and suffered an extremely strong backlash. With his current strength, I'm afraid that even Ling Wushuang and the others are no match for him. Shu Tianliang is no longer a threat. Zhuowen shook his head as his gaze converged on Shu Tianliang, who was on the ground in the distance. At this moment, Shu Tianliang was panting and his face was as pale as snow. His clothes were ragged and his hair was disheveled. The injuries on his body were probably much more serious than Zhuowen's. How could he possibly have the ability to attack Zhuowen? Yes. In that case, don't worry. The green threads on your body will soon be removed. You should try to be careful. The others are not good people. They might attack you. Xiao He nodded and began to concentrate on dealing with the green threads on Zhuowen's body. She became silent. Rumble. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying aura burst out from the void. Raising his head slightly, Zhuowen immediately saw that Zhu Kai had unsheathed the blood sword on his back and formed a huge sea of blood swords in the void. At this moment, Zhu Kai's scarlet eyes coldly glanced at Zhuowen. His sword finger pointed to the sky and suddenly, the boundless sea of blood swords directly descended on Zhuowen's head. Zhu Kai, that son of a bitch, actually launched a sneak attack at this time. Looking at the sea of blood swords in the void that was getting closer and closer, Zhuowen's forehead could not help but break out in cold sweat. Now that he was entangled by the green threads, he could not move at all. He could not use any of the treasures in his Chenkuan bag. Zhu Kai's sea of blood swords was obviously a terrifying killing move. Although Zhuowen's physical strength was unparalleled in the world, if he were to face such a terrifying attack head-on, even Zhuowen would not be able to withstand it. Zhu Kai's sudden attack was not expected by anyone. Even LV Yatao, Luo Xing and Qin Batian were stunned when they saw the sea of blood swords in the void. Not good. Zhu Kai actually made a move. Zhuowen is now tied up and unable to move. If he is hit by this attack, he will definitely die. Below, Qing Lian and Ling Wushuang's beautiful faces were filled with anger and worry. They did not expect Zhu Kai to be so despicable. Of all times, he chose to attack Zhuowen at this time. It was obvious that he wanted to kill Zhuowen and hit him while he was down. Haha. Zhuowen, I said that you will definitely die, he. The power of Zhu Kai's sea of blood swords is not something that an ordinary person can withstand. Moreover, you can't even use any defensive measures, so you will definitely die. At this moment, Xu Tianliang looked up to the sky and laughed wildly. He knew that when Zhu Kai used the sea of blood swords, Zhuowen's fate was already sealed. Rumble. In just an instant, the huge sea of blood swords completely submerged Zhuowen, who was entangled by the green threads. At this moment, Zhuowen's figure also completely disappeared from everyone's sight. Zhu Kai. You actually attacked Zhuowen? This battle clearly belongs to Zhuowen and Xu Tianliang. Why did you interfere? Luo Xing, who was on the stone statue, finally spoke. At this moment, her voice was extremely cold. Chapter 550. Vast Sea of Blood Swords. Luo Xing, aren't you meddling a little too much? What does it have to do with you that I am dealing with Zhuowen? Don't tell me that Zhuowen is from your Jade Lady Celestial Court? Zhu Kai's scarlet eyes shifted slightly as he looked indifferently at Luo Xing, who was standing on a stone statue in the Jade Pool Celestial Court. Even though Luo Xing was indeed much stronger than him, it was very unlikely that Luo Xing would be able to kill him if they really fought. With Luo Xing's character, it was impossible for him to stand against the Imperial Sword School because of Zhuo Wen. Luo Xing's face froze when she saw Zhu Kai's reaction. Zhu Kai was right. Zhuowen was not from the Jade Lady Celestial Court. She was just meddling in other people's business. Qin Batian and LV Yatao fell into a rare silence. LV Yatao's expression was as calm as water, but his slightly furrowed brows showed that he was not very calm. LV Yatao felt that Zhuowen was not simple. He was afraid that he would not die like this. As for the outcome, they would only know after the sea of blood swords disappeared. When the sea of blood swords completely engulfed Zhuowen, Zhuowen let out a low roar and instantly opened the 360 apertures in his body. Countless golden veins almost covered his entire body, making him look like a golden ancient Buddha. Kid, be careful. In 5 breaths, the restraints on your body will be completely removed. At this moment, Xiao Hei's expression became extremely solemn. She did not expect Zhu Kai, who had not made any moves before, to suddenly attack without warning. Immediately, Zhuowen was in such a predicament. At this moment, Zhuowen could not even move. He could only forcefully open the 365 apertures of the great Nirvana sun and rely on his strong physical body to resist the erosion of the sea of blood swords. Clang! Clang! Zhuowen's body was indeed tough. When the phantoms of the blood-red swords landed on his body, they did not cause him much damage. However, since he could not move, he could only passively become a living target. As a result, countless phantoms of the blood-red swords gathered on his body in an instant. Clang! 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 Why are there so many clang? Clang! 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 There seemed to be no end to the bloody sword phantoms around him, ceaselessly bombarding Zhuowen's body. Occasionally, sparks would fly in all directions. Although they were unable to break through Zhuowen's body, the recoil from each strike would cause Zhuowen's blood to boil and damage his internal organs. Clang! Clang! Clang, clang, clang. Are you done? Clang, 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 clang. You'll be done soon, Xiaohei. Clang, 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 clang. Looks like I have no choice but to go all out. Taking a deep breath, Zhuo Wen focused all of his attention on the meridians around his body. When the blood sword shadow gathered at a certain spot, he tried his best to control where the golden meridians were spread out to minimize the damage to himself. Clang, 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 clang. Immediately, Zhuo Wen's eyes shone with a blazing golden light. At this moment, Zhuo Wen was in an extremely sorry state. Countless terrifying wounds had cracked open on his powerful body, and a river of blood had practically formed beneath his feet. Fortunately, he possessed the recovery ability of the Underworld King's heart, so he was not so weak that he could not move. Clang, 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 clang. Zhuo Wen's eyelids twitched slightly. The storm of blood swords that had caused him to be in such a sorry state was actually so easily blocked by the bronze coffin. This was truly somewhat inconceivable to Zhuo Wen. Clang, 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 clang. However, Zhuo Wen shook his head as a bitter smile surfaced from the corners of his mouth. It should be known that the number of heavenly soul treasures in Muqin County could be counted with one hand. In the entire Muqin County, it was likely that only the 5 superfactions possessed one. Moreover, it was very likely that there was only one. Even a dignified superpower only had one heaven-rank spirit treasure, yet Zhuowen alone possessed such a treasure. It would be strange if others didn't covet it. As the saying goes, a tall tree attracts the wind. Zhuowen did not intend to reveal the existence of the bronze coffin unless he had no other choice. Brat, you're quite considerate. Blackie nodded his head in admiration when he heard this. It's time to go out now. Xu Tianliang and that Xu Kai, it's time for me to settle old scores with them. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with coldness. He took a step forward and slammed his palm on the edge of the sea of blood. Instantly, the entire sea of blood shook and collapsed. At this moment, the rest of the people outside the blood sea were staring at it. Everyone was waiting for the blood sea to disappear. What was Zhuowen's situation like? Of course, all of them knew that it was very likely that Zhuo Wen would be doomed this time. After all, Zhuo Wen was restrained by the green binding jade token and was utterly unable to move. Coupled with the terrifying might of the oceanic blood sword, he was simply a living target. Under such a desperate situation, no one believed that Zhuowen could survive. At this moment, Xu Tianliang had already returned to the stone statue of the Carefree Manor. Although he had suffered extremely serious injuries in the battle with Zhuowen and his strength had dropped to the point where he was even weaker than Ling Wushuang, he was still the #1 genius of the Carefree Manor. However, he was the #1 genius of the House of Marquis of Baichuan after all. Although Ling Wushuang and the others could seize Xu Tianliang's inheritance, they did not dare to offend Xu Tianliang and the House of Marquis of Baichuan behind him. This Xu Kai was too shameless. However, Xu Tianliang also knew that at this moment, he was seriously injured, and he had already used up his trump card. He was not Xu Kai's opponent at all. Even if he did not agree, Xu Kai would still snatch it from him. It was better to do him a favor now. Thinking of this, Xu Tianliang smiled and said, "Brother Zhu, what are you talking about? The one who killed Zhuowen is you. The little bastard's Chenkuan bag naturally belongs to you. Haha. Since Brother Xu has said so, then I won't decline this responsibility." Zhu Kai flattered rather hypocritically. Hearing Zhu Kai's words, Xu Tianliang had already begun to curse in his heart. He even secretly cursed Zhu Kai's 18 generations of ancestors. Catcher. Chapter 551. Challenging Zhu Kai. When this figure finally appeared in front of everyone's eyes, the entire place immediately descended into a strange silence. After which, numerous gazes involuntarily gathered on this figure. The figure's clothes were ragged, and his body was covered in golden light. His exposed skin was covered in terrifying golden veins. Other than that, there were also many terrifying wounds that continuously flowed with golden blood. However, these wounds were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Swoosh! A piercing sound suddenly burst out. The moment the figure that was suffused with golden light appeared, the huge bone spear in his hand was suddenly thrown out. It turned into a thin black lightning bolt and directly rushed towards Xu Tianliang, who was on the stone statue of the carefree manner. At this moment, Xu Tianliang also felt the terrifying piercing sound. When he saw that the piercing sound was rushing towards him, a shocked expression immediately appeared on his face. Moreover, what made him even more shocked was that the thing that was rushing towards him was Zhuowen's weapon, the tyrannical dragon scalebone spear. Damn it! Dodge it! Xu Tianliang's body was extremely weak. He knew that he could not dodge the extremely fast bone spear. Therefore, he clenched his teeth and directly moved his body to avoid being hit in his vital parts. Plop! An arrow of blood spurted out. Xu Tianliang's shoulder was directly pierced by the bone spear. The powerful force instantly propelled him backwards. In the end, he was nailed to a rock wall not far away. His entire body was suspended in the air and his posture was extremely miserable. Zhuowen, you're actually not dead. Xu Tianliang suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His pupils shrunk to the size of needles as he looked at the figure suffused with golden light below. A trace of fear finally appeared on his face. He really could not understand. Zhuowen's limbs were clearly bound by the green binding jade token and he was unable to move at all. Furthermore, he was directly hit by Zhuowen's ocean of blood sword. No matter how he looked at it, it was a hopeless situation where he would definitely die. How exactly did Zhuowen survive? At this moment, the others finally recovered their wits. Their eyes were filled with dense shock as they looked at Zhuowen, whose entire body was covered in golden light. Even Itao, who had an indifferent expression, involuntarily revealed a trace of emotion on his face. He was well aware of the power of the azure binding jade token and oceanic bloodsword. If he had been bound by these two powerful attacks, he would have been in quite a bit of trouble. However, Zhuowen wasn't a 5-wheel Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator. He wasn't even a 4-wheel Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator, yet he had been able to break through that desperate situation. This Zhuowen was truly extraordinary. This is getting more and more interesting. What other secrets does Zhuowen have? Itao's gaze focused on Zhuowen's body, and a trace of fighting spirit involuntarily rose in his heart. This Zhuowen was indeed as his intuition had guessed, he was not simple. Amongst them, the one who was most shocked was Zhu Kai, who was carrying the bloodsword on his back. He could not understand how Zhuowen had managed to survive in such a hopeless situation, and even break the ocean of bloodswords. Xu Tianliang, today, no one can save you. Go to hell. At this moment, Zhuowen's expression was extremely cold. The feeling of being bound and unable to move had made Zhuowen feel the taste of death for the first time. He knew that if his body wasn't strong enough, he really would have died there. When he thought of this, Zhuowen's killing intent towards Xu Tianliang grew even stronger. With a stomp of his foot, countless bolts of lightning shot out. Zhuowen instantly shot towards Xu Tianliang, who was hanging on the rock wall in the distance. Haha! What arrogance! Xu Tianliang is the first heir of the Marquis of Baichuan's estate. How can he be compared to a lowly commoner like you who was born in a low-level city? Why don't you just stay here? Zhu Kai sneered from the stone statue of the Wind Sword sect. He waved the sword in his right hand, and immediately, countless strands of energy boiled. A huge black hole exploded in the air, and a blood sword several hundred meters long shot out from the black hole. Xu Tianliang, who was originally filled with fear, finally calmed down a little when he saw Zhu Kai attack. He believed that with Zhu Kai's strength as a mid-4-wheel Ultimate Emperor, Zhu Kai was more than enough to stop Zhuowen. He might even be able to kill Zhuowen directly. Zhu Kai, don't be in such a hurry to die. Once I deal with Xu Tianliang, it'll be your turn very soon. A cold light flashed through Zhuowen's eyes as he looked at the huge blood sword shooting towards him. Zhu Kai had targeted him time and time again, which had already infuriated Zhuowen. Zhuowen no longer held back his strength. He opened all 365 acupoints in his body. In an instant, the golden light around Zhuowen reached its peak, making him seem like a miniature sun. Boom! In the face of the huge blood sword descending from the sky, Zhuowen's fist, which was suffused with golden light, tore through the air and directly smashed into the tip of the blood sword. Following that, everyone was shocked to discover that the mighty blood sword shattered into countless pieces under Zhuowen's golden fist. What? Zhu Kai's attack was directly shattered by Zhuowen? How can Zhuowen's physical strength be so terrifying? Qin Batian cried out involuntarily. He had personally seen Zhuowen shatter the huge blood sword with his bare hands. Looks like we've all underestimated Zhuowen. I'm afraid that his strongest point isn't his martial strength or mental strength, but his powerful physical body that is never revealed before. LV Itao's expression turned solemn. Since Zhuowen had been able to shatter Zhu Kai's full-powered attack with a single punch, his physical body was probably as strong as a mid-stage four-wheel Emperor Realm cultivator like Zhu Kai. What? This little bastard's physical body is actually so strong that he could easily shatter Zhu Kai's attack? This Zhuowen has been hiding his strength all this time? Looking at Zhuowen, who was still rushing over, Xu Tianliang's face finally revealed a deep fear. This Zhuowen had actually become so strong that it was suffocating him. Damn it! Zhuowen, just you wait. I, Xu Tianliang, won't let this go so easily. Xu Tianliang roared with unwillingness. He quickly took out his identity token and formed a seal. Immediately, he was sent out of the Yuan Qi Tower by a pillar of light. Only a lonely bone spear was left on the stone wall, and Xu Tianliang's figure was nowhere to be seen. In the end, Xu Tianliang was actually forced by Zhuowen to give up the ancient inheritance and leave the Yuan Qi Tower. This fact immediately shocked many people present. As one of the 5 super geniuses, Xu Tianliang was actually forced to such a state by an unknown person like Zhuowen. If this news were to be known by outsiders, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. At this moment, Zhu Kai's expression was extremely gloomy. Zhuowen's sudden eruption of such a powerful physical strength already made him faintly feel a trace of threat. This Zhuowen had actually hidden his strength so deeply. When he first dealt with Xu Tianliang, he didn't even use his full strength. Clang! Pulling out the bone spear from the stone wall, Zhuowen's gaze shifted slightly. His gaze immediately landed on Zhu Kai, who was on the Wind Sword Sect stone statue. With a light leap, he landed on the ground and slowly walked towards the Wind Sword Sect stone statue. The tip of the bone spear dragged on the ground, creating countless sparks. The surroundings were completely silent. Only the sound of the tip of the spear rubbing against the ground could be heard. When the crisp sound finally stopped, Zhuowen had already arrived at the foot of the Wind Sword Sect stone statue. After which, Zhuowen slightly raised his head and gently raised the bone spear in his hand. The eerily cold tip of the spear silently aimed at Zhu Kai above as he said in a clear voice, "Zhu Kai, if you have the guts, get down here. Otherwise, I will directly blast you off the stone statue." Zhuowen's arrogant voice resounded clearly in the area. No one in the surroundings mocked the arrogance in his words. Instead, there was a trace of anticipation. Everyone knew that the strength that the current Zhuowen had displayed was sufficient to be on par with a genius like Zhuowen. Looking at Zhuowen, who had raised his spear below, Zhu Kai's scarlet eyes narrowed into a dangerous arc as he coldly said, "Since you are courting death, I will fulfill your wish. Although your physical body is indeed powerful, you are perhaps still not qualified to challenge me." With that, the blood-red sword on Zhu Kai's back buzzed and directly left its sheath. Grasping the blood-red sword in his right hand, Zhu Kai took a step forward and turned into a blood-red blur as he directly shot towards Zhuowen. A powerful aura surged out, causing the air to become extremely chaotic. "Not qualified. You'll only know after you try." Countless streaks of golden light exploded. The Nirvana sun within Zhuowen's body had been unleashed to its limits. Right now, he was only at the peak of the ultimate third-wheel Emperor realm. He had no chance of victory against Zhu Kai at all. As a result, the only thing that Zhuowen could rely on was the entry-level Nirvana Sunday blazing golden light practically dyed the bone spear in Zhuowen's hand into a golden spear. An aura that was no weaker than Zhuowen's also erupted from Zhuowen's body. Boom! 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 Boom. Boom. Instantly, the golden and blood-red colors of the surroundings split into two regions. Two similarly powerful auras radiated with their own light and heat, erupting in the surroundings. Clang. 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 The sound of metal clashing continuously rang out as the golden and blood-red colors collided. The golden figure of Zhuowen and the blood-red figure of Zhu Kai had exchanged dozens of blows in an instant. This time, sparks flew, waves of air surged, and ripples spread out. So fast. The battle between Zhuowen and Zhu Kai is so much stronger than Xu Tianliang's. I can't even see their figures clearly. I can't even see a trace of their after-images. Ling Wushuang and the others were completely dumbfounded as they looked at the scene in the sky that was divided into two areas, one gold and one blood-red. They could only hear the sounds of the battle, but they could not see the people involved. Even a hint of hot-bloodedness rose in their hearts as they imagined when they would be able to reach the level of Zhuowen and Zhu Kai. This battle that caused the heavens and earth to change color made their blood boil involuntarily. Boom. 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 The golden spear light and the blood-red blur of the blade collided once again in the sky. Immediately, the powerful collision caused the surrounding space to collapse. Gold and blood-red colors practically filled the entire sky. Thump. 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 The golden figure and the blood-red figure both retreated a few hundred meters. Their feet suddenly stepped in mid-air before they could barely stop themselves. Ha. I really didn't expect that Zhuowen's strength could be so powerful. I, Zhu Kai, have really misjudged you previously. However, as I said before, your strength is not enough to defeat me today. Zhu Kai, who was full of blood-red qi, stared fixedly at Zhuowen in front of him as the corners of his mouth curled up into a mocking smile. Not enough. Then I should be able to. Zhuowen's face was full of indifference. He stomped his feet and a wave of mental energy gushed out from his Niwen palace. It was the mental energy that had broken through to level 4 upper realm a long time ago. Chapter 552. The Emperor's Wrath. This mental energy is the mental energy of a level 4 advanced mastery. Feeling the powerful mental energy surging out from Zhuowen's body, Zhu Kai's pupils shrank to the extreme as shock filled his face. Although Zhuowen had already revealed his identity as a level 4 arcana master back in the Mountain of Trials, Zhuowen's mental strength was only at the level of a level 4 small success. Now, however, Zhuowen's mental strength was much stronger than it was at the Mountain of Trials. This was clearly the power of a level 4 large success. Creak. Level 4 advanced mastery mental energy. At this moment, no matter how calm Elviatao was, his heart was shaken by the reality before his eyes. One must know that Zhuowen was not even 20 years old. To be able to become a level 4 arcanist at such a young age was already extremely impressive. Even someone as prideful as Elviatao could not help but admire Zhuowen's talent in mental energy. However, after reaching level 4 arcanist, the difficulty of advancing was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. If one did not have good luck and comprehension, it was very likely that one would be stuck for life. However, Zhuowen's mental energy had just reached the level 4 advanced mastery not long ago. Now, he had actually advanced to the level 4 advanced mastery mental energy. Wasn't this speed a little too fast? Not only Elviatao, but Luo Xing, Qin Batian, and the rest also had ugly expressions on their faces. Only now did they realize that Zhuowen's strongest point was not his terrifying physical strength, but his mental energy that had already reached the level 4 advanced mastery. How many trump cards does this Zhuowen have? Why do I feel that this kid's trump cards are endless? Qin Batian smiled bitterly as he stared at the golden figure in the sky with fear in his eyes. He noticed that every single time everyone thought that Zhuowen would fail and perish, this kid would erupt with an extraordinary trump card, and he'd avert danger every single time. It was like this when he faced Xu Tianliang, and now it was the same when he faced Zhuowen. At this moment, Qin Batian's heart was filled with reverence towards the small sun-like figure in the sky. He was very clear that if he were to face off against Zhuowen, he would only be defeated in the end. Zhu Kai, whether I am qualified or not is not up to you to decide. Let's see. Come on. Let me see your strongest ability. Otherwise, you will lose without a doubt. At this moment, boundless spiritual power formed a huge spiritual storm around Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen stood in the center of the spiritual storm, the blazing golden light illuminating the surrounding darkness like a lighthouse in the dark night. The powerful aura rolled over and actually caused Zhu Kai to retreat repeatedly. His expression was extremely cold and unsightly. At this moment, Zhuowen was inexplicably shocked. He did not expect Zhuowen to be hiding such a powerful mind force. If Zhuowen was only an initial grade 4 Arcana Master, he would not be afraid at all. However, a peak level 4 Arcana Master was extremely powerful. He was already above the mid-stage of the Ultimate Emperor realm. Zhu Kai's expression was extremely grave when faced with this powerful pressure. Are you saying that you want to decide the outcome of the battle in one move? Humph. So what if you have level 4 advanced spiritual power? I, Zhu Kai, am not necessarily your opponent. Zhu Kai's eyes flickered. His face was filled with murderous intent. He stomped his foot, and the blood-red long sword in his right hand suddenly appeared. Immediately, an extremely terrifying blood chi emerged around him. This blood chi seemed to be real, and looked quite terrifying and sinister. Have a taste of my move. This move is the highest codex of our sword control school. If you can break through my strongest move, then I have nothing to say about my loss. If you can't break it, then you can go die. With a low roar, the blood-red chi around Zhu Kai became extremely dense. Powerful auras spiraled out and swirled in the surroundings. Zhu Kai formed a complicated sword seal with his hands. Immediately, the surrounding blood-red chi began to boil violently, showing signs of condensing. Blood Sword Codex, final move, Emperor's Wrath. A dignified and vast voice suddenly boomed through the surroundings. The space behind Zhu Kai suddenly collapsed, and a huge figure stepped out from the collapsed space. A ferocious aura radiated outwards. This phantom wore a purple-gold crown on its head and a purple-gold dragon robe on its body. It had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, and it had a majestic aura. Around its body, there were faint auspicious clouds rising, and dragon shadows shooting in all directions. It was indescribably wonderful, and it was just like the image of a mighty emperor. Zhu Kai roared at the sky as soon as the emperor's figure appeared. The dense blood-red chi in the surroundings actually began to condense, turning into several hundred huge, strange blood-red swords. Countless blood-red dragon silhouettes constantly revolved around the swords. They seemed extremely heavy and boundless. The emperor's figure directly grasped the huge blood-red sword in his hand as soon as it formed. At this moment, a sliver of viciousness appeared on the emperor's handsome face. Terrifying flames of fury burned in his eyes, as if his heart was filled with monstrous fury. Emperor's wrath, millions of corpses and thousands of miles of blood. The emperor's figure's voice was as vast as the sea as it boomed through the area. Then, the figure, which was like a lofty mountain, suddenly stepped forward. The ground cracked, gravel floated up, and airwaves spread out. Die. Looking down at Zhuowen, who was like an ant, the emperor's figure was furious. The blood-red sword in his hand, which was surrounded by countless dragon silhouettes, tore through the void and shattered the space, and slashed down at Zhuowen's head. It's actually the Blood Sword Codex, the highest codex of the Imperial Sword Sect. I never thought that Zhu Kai would use the final move of the Blood Sword Codex, Emperor's Wrath. It seems that Zhu Kai is really going all out. LV Atao whispered as his eyes flickered. As the supreme codex of a superpower like the ruling Sword Gate, the Blood Sword Codex was a renowned existence in the entire county. Every move contained within it was extremely terrifying, and the final move was called Emperor's Wrath. Its power was the most terrifying. In the past, Zhu Kai had relied on this final move to kill a late-stage Ultimate Emperor realm cultivator. From then on, his name had shaken the entire provincial capital, and he had once been known as the Second Genius. However, Luo Xing's rise later on had overshadowed his title as the Second Genius. Zhuowen, you are the third person to force me to use the final move of the Blood Sword Codex. If you die under this move, then you can die without regrets. Zhu Kai stood on the shoulder of the figure and looked down indifferently at Zhuowen. The corners of his mouth were full of a victorious smile. After all, he had used this move to kill an advanced 4-wheel Emperor realm martial artist. Although Zhuowen had level 4 advanced mental power, in his opinion, it would be very difficult for him to block the move of the Emperor's wrath. If he was not careful, he might even die from this move. At this moment, Zhuowen's face was filled with seriousness. Zhu Kai's strongest move, the Emperor's wrath, was extremely powerful. It actually made him feel threatened. Clang, clang, clang. Taking in a deep breath, Zhuowen suddenly slapped his Chenkuan pouch. Immediately, streaks of cold light shot out like the bright moon in the night sky. They were extremely dazzling in the pitch-black night. This was the ultimate astral sword, a 4th-grade origin formation. The ultimate astral sword had changed drastically. Both its presence and might were much more powerful than before. Ever since Zhuowen had become a 4th-grade arcanist, he had been constantly improving and repairing the ultimate astral sword. In addition, during the few days he had spent in the ancient ruins, Zhuowen had obtained a lot of resources, including a considerable number of sword-shaped spiritual treasures. Moreover, these sword-shaped spiritual treasures were all low-earth rank spiritual treasures. Originally, the ultimate astral sword was composed of 108 advanced sword-shaped spiritual treasures. Now, after Zhuowen's continuous improvement and assembly, almost all the advanced spiritual treasures had been replaced by earth-rank spiritual treasures. As a result, the ultimate astral sword was now much more powerful than before. Coupled with Zhuowen's mental strength of the greater 4th grade, he could completely unleash the full power of the ultimate astral sword. As a result, the ultimate astral sword combined with his mental strength was probably even more powerful than his physical strength. The first move of the ultimate astral sword, Flying Sword Slash. The second move, Falling Flower Wave Slash. The third move, Revolving Heaven Sword Dance. 9 consecutive moves. The moment he summoned the ultimate astral sword, Zhuowen immediately used the 3 moves contained in the ultimate astral sword. Suddenly, countless sharp sword lights converged above Zhuowen, forming a terrifying sea of sword lights. The surrounding tens of thousands of feet was filled with endless sword light. The sound of metal clashing constantly resounded from the sea of sword light, crisp and ear-piercing. The blood-red sword in the hand of the Emperor Shadow was extremely fast. It cut through the void and instantly arrived above the sea of sword lights above Zhuowen. The moment the sharp blood sword came into contact with the sea of sword lights, it was as if it had fallen into a swamp. Its speed was greatly reduced, and it even looked a little slow. At the same time, the terrifying aftermath of the collision spread out in the void and shattered countless spatial barriers. The sea of sword lights and the blood sword were in a deadlock. Just break it for me. Seeing that the blood sword was blocked by the sea of sword lights, Zhuowen's scarlet eyes narrowed. He waved his sword, and the Emperor Shadow's aura suddenly soared. He suddenly swung his sword again, and it actually pushed the sea of sword lights back dozens of meters. Zhuowen snorted and could not help but retreat. Ha! Zhuowen, I said that you can't take the Emperor's wrath. You are indeed strong, but compared to me, you are still far behind. Seeing that Zhuowen directly retreated, Zhu Kai's face suddenly revealed a happy smile, and a trace of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. He wanted to let Zhuowen clearly understand that the consequences of going against him would be a foolish decision. Thinking of this, Zhu Kai waved his sword again, and forced the sea of sword lights back again. It was almost suppressing Zhuowen, and he could not make any extra movements. Is that so? The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curved into a smile. Then, waves of mental energy surged out from his Niwen palace. Suddenly, the sea of sword lights soared to an extremely terrifying level, and it actually shattered the huge blood sword. Even the Emperor Shadow in the void faintly showed signs of collapsing. Fart. Seeing that the Emperor's wrath was broken, Zhu Kai violently spat out a mouthful of blood and flew back. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Chapter 553. The 2 ancient inheritances left empty when Zhuowen released an even more terrifying mind power. The other onlookers were puzzled. They also found that Zhuowen's mind power had indeed increased a lot, but it was still only at the level of level 4 advanced mastery. Zhuowen actually has more than one strand of mind power. It seems that he has at least 100 strands. Yatao's observation was much sharper than the others. He instantly saw the abnormality in Zhuowen's body. Just as Yatao had said, Zhuowen's mental strength was still at the level of a 4th-grade advanced arcanist. However, Zhuowen possessed a terrifying mental strength secret skill, the Myriad Evolution Scripture. This secret skill could transform his mental strength into tens of thousands of strands, and each strand of mental strength was comparable to an arcanist of the same level. After the derivation of Myriad Evolution Scripture, Zhuowen now had nearly 100 strands of mind power in his Niwen Palace, and each strand was comparable to a level 4 advanced mastery arcanist. If all these strands of mind power were to be released, it would be comparable to the simultaneous attack of nearly 100 level 4 advanced mastery arcanists. If such a huge amount of mind power were to be superimposed, its power was self-evident. The power of the Emperor's wrath that Zhuowen displayed was indeed terrifying. Even though Zhuowen displayed level 4 advanced mastery mind power, he was still suppressed. In the end, Zhuowen was forced to release nearly 100 strands of mind power hidden in his Niwen Palace. Only then was he able to break Zhu Kai's Emperor's wrath. At this moment, Zhu Kai's mouth was spurting blood. He stared at Zhuowen's figure below, which was glowing with golden light. He still could not figure out how Zhuowen broke his Emperor's wrath. Clearly, Zhuowen's mind power was only at the level of level 4 advanced mastery. Zhuowen stood quietly and waved his right hand. Suddenly, the sea of sword light in the sky shattered and turned into a stream of sword light. It cut through the void and swept directly toward Zhu Kai, who was flying backward. He did not intend to let Zhu Kai go. If possible, it would be best to kill Zhu Kai here to prevent future troubles. Zhuowen, it's not that easy to kill me. As Zhu Kai flew backward, he could sense the killing intent on Zhuowen's face. His face filled with both shock and anger. Gritting his teeth, he pulled out his identity medallion and prepared to flee. You want to leave? It's not that easy. Zhuowen's sharp eyes immediately spotted Zhu Kai, who was in midair, and had already silently taken out his identity token. With a stomp of his right foot, the bone spear under his feet immediately floated into the air. Next, he exerted force with his right foot, and the bone spear transformed into a ray of light that accurately swept past Zhu Kai's palm. Dong. In an instant, the identity badge in Zhu Kai's hand was knocked away by the bone spear. Furthermore, under the power of the bone spear, he violently vomited a mouthful of blood. At this moment, Zhu Kai was truly terrified. Looking at the sword light in the sky, this was the first time he felt that death was so close. Damn it! Damn it! Cursing, Zhuowen could only raise his blood-red sword again. He knew that if he didn't resist, he really would die under Zhuowen's sword light. 10 Swords Blood Shield Technique. In mid-air, Zhu Kai forcefully suppressed the boiling blood in his body. He fiercely twisted his waist, and the blood-red sword in his hand transformed into numerous sword shadows. Suddenly, these sword shadows were like blood-red shields, surrounding Zhuowen in the middle. It looked like an impregnable fortress. The moment Zhu Kai used the 10 Swords Blood Shield technique, the sword light in the sky had already arrived, and instantly slammed into the 10 Swords Blood Shield technique. Boom! What made many people dumbfounded was that Zhu Kai, who had used the 10 Swords Blood Shield technique, directly transformed into a blood-red shadow the moment he came into contact with the sword light. He violently slammed into the ground below, causing the ground to shatter into countless pieces, forming a huge pit that was hundreds of feet deep. In the deep pit, the 10 Swords Blood Shield technique around Zhu Kai had almost shattered and dimmed. His body was covered in countless wounds, and streams of blood directly spurted out. His entire body was extremely weak, and he looked exceptionally miserable. Swoosh! A piercing sound descended. Zhuowen coldly looked at Zhu Kai, whose body was twitching in the pit. His face was pale and bloodless, and his eyes were filled with indifference. Zhu Kai, if you want to kill me, Zhuowen, then you should be prepared to be killed instead. It's useless even if you're a super genius from the Imperial Sword Sect, one of the 5 super forces in the provincial capital. Zhuowen looked down from above and threw the bone spear in his hand. It directly tore through the surrounding air and shot towards Zhu Kai's forehead. Zhuowen was determined to kill Zhu Kai. Zhuowen, you dare to kill me. If you kill me, your Vinarma city will suffer the revenge of our Imperial Sword Sect. At this moment, fear surfaced in Zhu Kai's eyes, especially when he looked at the bone spear that was shooting towards him. A trace of despair had already surfaced in his eyes. However, just as the bone spear was about to pierce Zhu Kai's forehead, a formless and transparent energy suddenly appeared and directly knocked the bone spear away. Who? With a wave of his right hand, Zhuowen caught the bone spear that had already been knocked away. He frowned and slightly raised his head. Immediately, he saw Lv Tao on the Tiangang sect stone statue and slowly withdrew his hand. It was obvious that Lv Tao had stopped him just now. Zhuowen. After all, Zhu Kai is the #1 genius of the Imperial Sword Sect. He is highly regarded by the sect master of the Shenyuan sect. If you kill him just like that, then you will truly become a mortal enemy of the Imperial Sword Sect. Moreover, the War of the 9 Counties is about to begin. After all, Zhu Kai is one of the 5 super geniuses and the main force of the War of the 9 Counties. You cannot kill this person. Lv Tao placed his hands behind his back and calmly looked straight at Zhuowen. There was not the slightest hint of abnormality in his eyes. Hearing this, Zhuowen frowned slightly. He was extremely wary of the #1 genius of the House of Marquis Qin. After all, he had no idea how strong Lv Tao was. He only knew that this person's cultivation was at least at the Ultimate Emperor realm. Although he had the bronze coffin as a trump card, he knew that his chances of winning against Lv Tao were not high. Zhuowen. The War of the 9 Counties concerns the honor of Muqin County. I hope that you can give me, Lv Tao, some face and let Zhu Kai go. Moreover, I know that you once killed the second son of the House of Marquis Baichuan, Shu Liang, in the Dark Forest. This means that you have already formed a deadly feud with the House of Marquis Baichuan. If you kill Zhu Kai now, I'm afraid that the Imperial Sword Sect will not rest until you are dead. I know that you are a smart person and know how terrible the consequences of killing Zhu Kai will be, therefore, my suggestion may be useful to you. Moreover, the leader of the Imperial Sword Sect, Shenyuan Li, is quite magnanimous. As long as you don't kill Zhu Kai, I don't think he will find trouble with you. You don't have to worry that Zhu Kai will incite the other members of the Imperial Sword Sect to deal with you after he returns. Just as Zhuowen was secretly frowning, Lv Tao's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. He could not help but be slightly startled. Lv Tao's words were rather sincere and his analysis was very methodical. Zhuowen pondered for a moment and agreed. Now that he had completely offended the House of Marquis Baichuan, there was no need to offend the Imperial Sword Sect. Since young Master Lv has spoken, then I will spare Zhu Kai's dog life. The next time you bark like a dog, I, Zhuowen, will personally take your dog life. As he spoke, Zhuowen no longer paid any attention to Zhu Kai, who was in the deep pit with a vicious expression. Instead, he walked towards Qing Lian, who was not far away. Now that he had consecutively defeated Shu Tianliang and Zhu Kai, 2 out of the 5 ancient inheritances were empty. He planned to give one of them to Qing Lian. Zhu Kai could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood in anger when he heard Zhuowen's words. He wanted to retort a few words, but he remembered that he had barely managed to keep his life. In the end, he swallowed his anger. However, from the resentment that flashed in his eyes, Zhuowen knew that Zhu Kai would not let it go so easily. Zhuowen, just you wait. Since you won't kill me, you won't have the chance in the future. After viciously cursing in his heart, Zhu Kai could no longer bear the strange gazes of the surrounding people. He awkwardly found his identity token, turned into a beam of light, and disappeared from the place of inheritance. Shu Tianliang and Zhu Kai were both defeated by Zhuowen. This. Ling Wushuang, Qing Lian, and the other 3 stared blankly at the disappearing Zhu Kai and the slowly approaching Zhuowen. A sense of unreality instantly welled up in their hearts. Although they all admitted that Zhuowen was indeed powerful, in their hearts, they still did not think that Zhuowen had the strength comparable to the 5 super geniuses. However, Zhuowen, who had consecutively defeated Xu Tianliang and Zhu Kai, let them know how ridiculous their arrogance was. The strength of Zhuowen in front of them had far exceeded their imagination. To be able to defeat Zhu Kai, his strength was probably close to the second genius, Luo Xing, right? Slowly arriving in front of Qing Lian, Zhuowen smiled and said, "Now, there are still 2 ancient inheritances left. They are the Wind Sword Sect and the Carefree Villa. Qing Lian, you can choose one first. Treat it as a reward for your help in the past." As soon as Zhuowen said this, Ling Wushuang and the others who stood nearby couldn't help but be stunned. Qing Lian was stunned as well. She never imagined that Zhuowen would actually directly cup his hands and hand over a seat and let Qing Lian choose first. "Don't worry about anything. If you treat me, Zhuowen, as a friend, then choose. Otherwise, you don't treat me as a friend." Zhuowen knitted his brows and said with some displeasure. Seeing Zhuowen's appearance, Qing Lian could only helplessly nod her head. She was very clear about Zhuowen's character. Once he had decided on something, even 10 bulls could not pull him back. If she was hesitant, Zhuowen would not like it. "Then I choose the Wind Sword Sect." After pondering for a moment, Qing Lian finally chose the Wind Sword Sect. Subsequently, her jade-like feet tapped lightly. Under the envious gazes of Ling Wushuang and the other 2, she directly leaped onto the stone statue of the Wind Sword Sect. When Luo Xing, who was on the stone statue of the Jade Pool Immortal Garden, saw Zhuowen hand over an ancient inheritance to Qing Lian, a trace of gentleness surfaced in her beautiful eyes. "As for the inheritance of the Carefree Villa, the 3 of you can compete among yourselves. Whoever is stronger will be able to obtain the inheritance of the Carefree Villa." Chapter 554. Choice, Blood Demon Inheritance. When Zhuowen finished his sentence, not only were Ling Wushuang, Qing Hu, and Luo Yaro stunned, even Elviatao, Luo Xing, Qing Lian, and Qin Batian were stunned. Zhuowen's words confused them. Was he planning to give up the last inheritance of Carefree Manor? But ancient inheritances were so precious, how could anyone be so stupid to give it up? "Zhuowen, are you kidding?" At this moment, it was Ling Wushuang, Qing Hu, and Luo Yaro who were the most perturbed. As far as they were concerned, the last ancient inheritance belonged to Zhuowen alone, and they didn't dare fight for it or even think about it. After all, Zhuowen had defeated 2 super geniuses, Xu Tianliang and Zhu Kai. They could not afford to offend him. Therefore, the 3 of them subconsciously thought that Zhuowen was joking. Seeing how cautious Ling Wushuang and the other 2 were, Zhuowen shook his head helplessly. He did not answer Ling Wushuang's question. Instead, he stomped his feet and 2 pairs of huge lightning wings appeared on his back. He left the place and flew towards the end of the inheritance. This Zhuowen's sudden departure immediately caused many people to be astonished. They had not expected that what Zhuowen had said earlier was true. He actually intended to give up the last ancient inheritance. Elviatao, who was on the Tiangang sect stone statue, frowned. He did not understand Zhuowen's actions. Zhuowen could have obtained the inheritance of Carefree Manor. Why did he give it up in the end? Or was there something more attractive to him than Carefree Manor? Could it be, as if he had thought of something, Elviatao suddenly turned around and stared at the direction Zhuowen had left. Indeed, Zhuowen had gone to the end of the inheritance. There was a huge blood-colored stone statue with a beast's head and a human body. The inheritance was called Blood Demon Inheritance. Is Zhuowen crazy? He actually chose the Blood Demon Inheritance. At that moment, Elviatao acted out of character and could not help but exclaim. His exclamation attracted the attention of the others. Swish, swish. Numerous gazes immediately converged on Zhuowen's departing figure. At this moment, Zhuowen had unknowingly climbed onto the huge blood-colored stone statue. He actually chose the Blood Devil Legacy. Was Zhuowen's brain flooded with water? Or do you want to die? Qin Baishan's eyes were filled with bewilderment and disbelief. The Blood Devil Legacy was much more difficult than the Carefree Manor's legacy. Not only that, failure would result in death. There were simply too many drawbacks. Choosing the Blood Devil Legacy was akin to courting death in Qin Baishan's eyes. Zhuowen is too impulsive. Luo Xing and Qing Lian frowned at the same time, especially Qing Lian. She clenched her fists and her heart was filled with worry. When Ling Wushuang, Qing Hu, and Luo Yaro came back to their senses, they were pleasantly surprised. They never thought that Zhuowen would actually give up the carefree manner's inheritance and choose the Blood Devil's inheritance instead. They knew that this was an opportunity for the three of them. Swish! Ling Wushuang immediately reacted the fastest. She took the lead and shot towards the carefree manner's inheritance. Qing Hu and Luo Yaro glanced at each other and crossed each other in an attempt to stop Ling Wushuang. Ling Wushuang, if you want to obtain the carefree manner's inheritance, you'll have to get past us first. Qing Hu and Luo Yaro immediately used their best attacks and worked together to attack Ling Wushuang. The two of you aren't my opponent. If you really want to compete with me, don't blame me for being impolite. A trace of coldness flashed through Ling Wushuang's eyes when she saw Qing Hu and Luo Yaro's joint attack. She was an early third wheel Ultimate King Realm expert, while Qing Hu and Luo Yaro were only peak second wheel Ultimate King Realm experts. She didn't fear them at all even if they worked together. Ling Wushuang cried out in a lovely voice. A long silver whip had unknowingly appeared in her hand. With a wave of her jade-like hand, countless whip shadows surged out in an overwhelming manner, directly breaking the combined attack of Qing Hu and Luo Yao. Spurt! The whip images struck their chests mercilessly after their attack was broken through, immediately causing them to vomit blood. They were blown away and landed heavily on the ground, forming a huge crater. After defeating Qing Hu and Luo Yaro, Ling Wushuang put away her silver whip and flipped over to the stone statue of Carefree Manor. Her pretty face was filled with excitement. At the same time, her beautiful eyes looked at the figure on the huge blood-red stone statue in front of her. Her eyes were filled with gratitude. She had never thought that Zhuowen's two unintentional actions would actually save her life. Ling Wushuang was naturally extremely grateful. Zhuowen, do you really plan on choosing the Blood Demon's inheritance? You don't need me to tell you the dangers of the inheritance, do you? In the end, Elviatao still spoke up. He didn't want a peerless genius like Zhuowen to fall helplessly because he chose the Blood Devil legacy. He was very clear about the importance of a genius like Zhuowen to Muqin County. If this person was nurtured properly, he would definitely be of great help to Muqin County in the Battle of the Nine Counties half a year later. It would be a pity if he fell in the inheritance land. However, Zhuowen shook his head and said with a serious expression, "No one can change the decision that I, Zhuowen, have made. The Blood Demon inheritance is indeed terrifying, but if I'm afraid because of this, how can I face the difficulties on the path of martial arts that is full of thorns?" After speaking, Zhuowen no longer paid attention to Elviatao. Instead, he silently sat cross-legged on the shoulder of the blood-red statue and began to silently wait for the Blood Demon inheritance to open. Hearing Zhuowen's words, Elviatao felt somewhat helpless. This Zhuowen's temper was indeed stubborn. He was somewhat similar to Lu Hantian in the past. Luatao didn't know why, but when he looked at Zhuowen's figure on the blood-red statue, he couldn't help but think of 100 years ago. That person had defeated all the geniuses in Muqin County and obtained first place in the Origin Qi Tower battle. That person had almost entered the top 10 of the Azure Emperor rankings. That person was his uncle, Lu Hantian. Zhuowen. The gap between ideals and reality is always cruel. Even Lu Hantian in the past did not obtain the slightest benefit from the Blood Demon inheritance. Are you so confident that you can successfully pass the trial of the Blood Demon inheritance? It's just a pity for a genius like you. Shaking his head, a trace of pity appeared on Elviatao's face. Perhaps the moment Zhuowen chose the Blood Demon inheritance, this Zhuowen was already a dead man in his heart. Therefore, he no longer paid attention to Zhuowen. Instead, he closed his eyes and silently waited for the inheritance to open. After about half an incense stick's time, the surface of the 5 inheritance stone statues in the core area of the inheritance land suddenly emitted a dazzling light. 5 pillars of light shot up from the statues and Elviatao, Luo Xing, and the other 4 people on the 5 statues slowly disappeared into the pillars of light. Clearly, They had been sent to their respective trial spaces by the 5 inheritance stone statues. They've all left. Looks like this blood demon inheritance is really different. It still hasn't sent me to the trial space. Slowly opening his eyes, Zhuowen saw that LV Atao and the other 4 had already disappeared. The corner of his mouth slightly curled, but his eyes revealed a trace of anticipation. What would the trial space of the blood demon inheritance be like? Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Just as Zhuowen's imagination was running wild, a blood-colored pillar of light shot up into the sky and directly enveloped Zhuowen. However, after the pillar of light disappeared, Zhuowen's figure had already disappeared. On the platform outside the Origin Qi Tower, the 9 people led by LV Nantien quietly stood on the high platform, enjoying the attention of countless faction leaders. Everyone knew that the 9 people still standing on the high platform were all exceptional geniuses who had entered the inheritance land. In particular, Jiu Tian, whose aura was the weakest, received the most attention. Now, everyone knew that the city lord of this unknown low-level city, Rattan Armor City, was called Jiu Tian. This was because a famous dark horse had appeared in Rattan Armor City, and that dark horse was called Zhuowen. It was because of Zhuowen's name that Rattan Armor City had become a hot topic of discussion. Even Jiu Xin and Hu Wuying, who had already been eliminated, were now proud when they said that they were geniuses of Rattan Armor City. The current Rattan Armor City was no longer the same as before. Due to Zhuowen's stunning performance in the Origin Qi Tower, who knew how many faction leaders wanted to curry favor with this small Rattan Armor City. Even the number 1 super city, Lingtian City, took the initiative to extend an olive branch to Rattan Armor City. This action naturally raised Rattan Armor City's prestige to the extreme. Now, Jiu Xin and Hu Wuying truly felt elated. The geniuses of super cities, who usually looked down on them, were now very careful when they spoke to them. This great contrast made the 2 of them feel very pleased. Of course, the 2 of them also knew that this great contrast was brought about by Zhuowen. Therefore, the 2 of them revered and worshipped Zhuowen like a god. The ownership of the 5 ancient inheritances should be revealed very soon. This time, LV Atao, Luo Xing, and Zhuowen should be able to obtain one of the inheritances. The remaining 2 inheritances should be decided by Qin Batian, Xu Tianliang, and Zhuowen. Lu Nantien raised his head to look at the top of the Origin Qi Tower and smiled. Zhuowen shouldn't have the strength to obtain the ancient inheritances. This child's potential is indeed strong, but his foundation is too weak and his strength isn't strong. There's still quite a large gap between him and Xu Tianliang and Qin Batian. Xu Chang suddenly interrupted. When mentioning Zhuowen, the short and fat Marquis Baichuan's eyes were filled with coldness. Brother Xu is right. Zhuowen's strength is indeed not strong. It will be difficult for him to obtain an ancient inheritance. The master of the meteorite, Marquis Yongsheng, and Shenyuan Li all nodded in agreement. Do you all think so? However, I feel that Zhuowen isn't simple. Lu Nantien shook his head and spoke up for Zhuowen. Lu Nantian's performance naturally caused the others to be surprised. However, they didn't take it to heart. In their opinion, Lu Nantien was planning to recruit Zhuowen, so they were only subjectively optimistic about Zhuowen. Whoosh! Suddenly, a beam of light shot out from the top of the Origin Qi Tower and landed at the bottom of the tower. A figure was faintly discernible within the beam of light. Hey! Someone was eliminated so quickly. Chapter 555. The 2 eliminated geniuses on the high platform, the Lord of Lingtian City, Ling Tian, Jiu Tian, and the other lords of Lingtian City had slightly unnatural expressions on their faces. It was unlikely that it was one of the 5 super geniuses who had been eliminated so quickly. It was very likely that it was a genius under their command. On the other hand, Xu Chang appeared somewhat indifferent. In his opinion, the 5 ancient inheritances were definitely the 5 super geniuses. Even Zhuowen would not be able to compete with the 5 super geniuses. The first one to be eliminated might be that little bastard Zhuowen. Xu Chang maliciously muttered in his heart as a sinister smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. Swoosh! The white light completely disappeared, and an extremely miserable figure suddenly fell to the ground. This person's clothes were ragged, and his hair was disheveled. In particular, there was a huge wound on his shoulder blade. Streams of cherry-red blood continuously spurted out from the wound. When everyone's gazes gathered on this sorry figure's face, the scene fell into a strange silence. Hiss. After the silence, the sound of people inhaling cold air rose and fell. Everyone looked at this figure in disbelief because this extremely sorry figure was none other than one of the 5 super geniuses, Xu Tianliang. The 9 people on the high platform were also stunned. Even Xu Chang, who had a cold smile on his face, was stunned. The smile on his face gradually froze, and his pupils shrank to the size of needles. He stared in disbelief at his son's sorry figure, whose face was pale and bloodless. "Ah, Tianliang, who injured you like this? This old man will definitely pull out his tendons and peel off his bones, and make him suffer a fate worse than death." Finally, Xu Chang roared and instantly arrived at Xu Tianliang's side. He hurriedly helped Xu Tianliang, whose mind was already somewhat muddled, up. His entire body trembled in anger, and his eyes were bloodshot. "It's actually Xu Tianliang? The first one to be eliminated is actually Xu Tianliang. Just, what's going on? How is this possible?" Xu Tianliang is an expert at the peak of the Ultimate Emperor stage, and is also one of the 5 super geniuses. Apart from the other 4 super geniuses, who else has the strength to defeat him? Did LV Atao make a move? At this moment, the surrounding crowd's emotions were boiling. They all knew that there were a total of 5 ancient inheritances in the land of inheritance. Logically speaking, each of the 5 super geniuses should be able to obtain one. However, it was also possible that Xu Tianliang had recklessly competed with LV Atao. Hence, it was not surprising that he was beaten to such a state. In the eyes of the surrounding people, only the other 4 super geniuses could beat Xu Tianliang to such a state. As for the other 5, they should not have such strength. He once again ascended the high platform, as if Xu Tianliang's elimination didn't affect him at all. On the high platform, everyone, including Lu Nantian, tacitly didn't ask anything. They all knew that although Xu Chang looked extremely calm on the surface, his heart wasn't as calm as it appeared. The silence on the high platform didn't last for long. Xu Chang suddenly turned his head and said to Shenyuan Li, "Brother Shenyuan, just now, Tianliang told me that not only did that little bastard Zhuoan take the initiative to provoke Tianliang, he even recklessly provoked your Imperial Sword School's Jukai. This child's ambition is extremely great. He wants to occupy 2 inheritances by himself." When Xu Chang said this, Shenyuan Li frowned and said in surprise, "Provoke Jukai? I remember that Zhuoan and Jukai don't have any grudges, right? Moreover, it's enough that this child has obtained 1 inheritance. There's no need for him to take the extra step of fighting for another inheritance. After all, in the land of inheritance, each person can only obtain 1 ancient inheritance. Hee. That little bastard Zhuoan is arrogant and conceited. It's not impossible for him to provoke Jukai for no reason." Xu Chang shook his head and said in confusion. Xu Chang's words also made Shenyuan Li frown. However, he shook his head and said indifferently, "So what if Zhuoan provoked Jukai? Jukai is much stronger than Zhuoan. It's impossible for Zhuoan to win." Shenyuan Li was very confident in Jukai. He knew that Jukai's cultivation had reached the mid-stage of the 4-wheel emperor realm. In the entire province, the only people who could defeat Jukai were LV Atao of the House of Marquis Qin and Luo Xing of the Jade Lady Star Court. As for Zhuoan, although Zhuoan's potential was amazing, he would only be defeated if he went up against Jukai. The other people on the high platform also heard the conversation between Xu Chang and Shenyuan Li. They couldn't help but shake their heads. Obviously, they didn't think highly of Zhuoan's provocation of Jukai, or perhaps, they thought it was a foolish action. Jiu Tian frowned slightly and a trace of worry appeared on his face. He had heard a little about Jukai's strength. He was a genius who was only second to LV Atao. If it wasn't for Luo Xing, he might be the second genius now. Whoosh! The crowd didn't have to wait for too long. Another beam of light shot out from the Yuan Qi Tower and landed at the bottom of the tower. Then, Everyone's gazes converged on this beam of light again. In particular, the 9 people on the high platform stared closely at the beam of light. They knew that it was very likely that either Zhuowen or Zhu Kai was behind the beam of light. It's definitely Zhuowen. No matter how heaven-defying that Zhuowen is, it's impossible for him to be the opponent of an ultimate king realm cultivator with 4 wheels, Xu Chang said calmly. However, there was a pair of cold eyes in his eyes. Zhuowen had first killed his second son, Xu Liang, in the dark forest, and even eliminated Xu Tianliang from the legacy grounds. As a result, the Marquis of Baichuan's estate was unable to obtain a single legacy. As a result, the enmity between them was huge. It was even to the extent that Xu Chang was already silently planning in his heart. After Zhuowen appeared later, he would seize the opportunity when Lu Nantian and the others weren't paying attention to directly kill Zhuowen, and he wouldn't hesitate even if he would be cursed by others. Shenyuan Li's gaze was also fixed on the light pillar. He did not know why, but the figure in the light pillar gave him a familiar feeling. A strange, ominous feeling crept into his heart, causing him to feel suffocated. The beam of light receded, and a miserable figure with disheveled hair slowly appeared before everyone's eyes. The moment the figure appeared at the bottom of the tower, a mist of blood spurted out from his wounds. Afterwards, the figure spat out a mouthful of blood and slowly fell to the ground. Zhuowen, I, Zhu Kai, will not let this go. The moment he fell, Zhu Kai finally shouted out a hoarse voice. Bang! The sound of a heavy object falling to the ground slowly reverberated across the somewhat quiet square. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone was stunned as they stared at the figure that had fallen to the ground amidst the bloody mist. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. This figure was actually one of the 5 super geniuses, the genius of the Imperial Sword Sect, Zhu Kai, whose strength was even greater than Xu Tianliang's. He was a genuine ultimate king realm expert with 4 wheels, but he had actually fallen to such a miserable state. Zhuowen again? How did Zhuowen do it? He defeated 2 super geniuses in a row. Xu Tianliang was defeated by him, and even the stronger Zhu Kai was defeated. This is truly heaven-defying. Zhuowen's strength has really reached such a level. Even Zhu Kai was beaten to such a state. Isn't this too terrifying? Chapter 556. A pillar of blood soared to the sky. At this moment, not only were the people in the plaza stunned, even the leaders of the 5 super factions on the high platform had their mouths agape, their faces filled with disbelief. Especially Xu Chang, the shock on his face was even more intense than everyone else's, nearly causing him to cry out in surprise. Swoosh! Carrying a long sword on his back, Shenyuan Li instantly arrived in front of Zhu Kai. He extended his right hand and felt Zhu Kai's pulse, his brows slightly knitted together. He had not expected Zhu Kai's injuries to be so serious. After muttering to himself for a while, Shenyuan Li's right hand clawed onto Zhu Kai's chest. Immediately, surging yuan power continuously flowed into Zhu Kai's body, causing the originally deathly pale Zhu Kai's complexion to improve slightly. However, he was still in a state of deep unconsciousness. Seeing Zhu Kai in such a state, Shenyuan Li's brows tightly knitted together. With a wave of his right hand, surging waves of energy immediately wrapped around Zhu Kai, causing him to float beside him. Shenyuan Li cupped his hands towards Lu Nantian and the rest on the high platform, solemnly saying, "Everyone, I'm sorry. Zhu Kai's injuries are too serious. I must bring him back to the sect for treatment. I'm afraid I won't be able to participate in the following Yuan Energy Tower battle." Shenyuan Li's words caused the surrounding people to be shocked. It seemed that Zhu Kai's injuries were truly very serious, or else it would not have caused Shenyuan Li to be so wary and solemn. At the same time, a trace of respect and fear rose in many people's hearts towards Zhuowen. Although he was of humble birth, his talent was extremely high, and his temperament was truly decisive and ruthless. Xu Tianliang and Zhu Kai, these 2 great geniuses, had actually been injured to such an extent. It had to be said that this Zhuowen was truly audacious. Was he not afraid of the revenge of these 2 super factions? On the high platform, Lu Nantian nodded and said, "Since this is the case, Brother Shenyuan can leave. After all, Saving lives is more important. Xianyuan Li nodded and wrapped Zhu Kai with his power. With a tap of his right hand, the sword on his back flew out of its scabbard and became 10 feet long. Then, he took the two of them and flew up on the sword, disappearing from where they were. Xu Tianliang and Zhu Kai have both been eliminated. In that case, one of the inheritances should belong to none other than Zhuo Wen. In that case, the last inheritance should be the competition between Qing Lian, Ling Wushuang, Qing Hu, and Luo Yao. Looking at the 8 names still lit up on the light screen, LV Nanshan's eyes stared straight at Zhuo Wen's name. He was extremely curious about this unknown youth. How did this child grow to such a level? Boom! Suddenly, 2 pillars of light rose from the Vitality Tower. Two figures appeared in front of everyone. They were Qinghu and Luo Yao. After being defeated by Ling Wushuang, they had no choice but to leave the land of inheritance. At this point, there were only 6 people left in the land of inheritance. They were LV Atao, Luo Xing, Qin Batian, Zhuoan, Ling Wushuang, and Qing Lian. The appearance of Qinghu and Luo Yao did not attract the slightest bit of attention. Their strength was originally at the bottom of the 10 people. It would be strange if they could obtain an ancient inheritance. The name list of the ancient inheritances will be out soon. I wonder how many of the 5 ancient inheritances that appeared in the land of inheritance belong to the Heaven Stage sects. Lu Nantian looked at the 6 names on the screen with burning eyes. The Heaven Stage sects were extremely powerful in the ancient era. Just one of them could directly destroy the current Qing Xian Empire. The others were also looking forward to what kind of inheritance the remaining people would obtain. They knew that the results would be out soon. Everyone did not have to wait for too long. Suddenly, a golden light shone behind LV Atao's name on the screen. Soon after, a row of golden words began to appear. LV Atao, Tiangang Sect, Ancient Heaven Stage Sec. Congratulations, congratulations. Brother LV, your LV Atao has indeed lived up to everyone's expectations and obtained the Heaven Stage Sect's inheritance. The moment this row of words appeared, everyone on the high platform congratulated Lu Nantian. Their words were full of envy. Lu Nantian also secretly sighed in relief. Although he knew that it would not be difficult for LV Atao to obtain the Heaven Stage Sect's inheritance, he was still not that confident and certain in his heart. Now that he saw it with his own eyes, he naturally felt a lot more relaxed. Many thanks for everyone's praise. The second person to obtain the inheritance will soon appear. Lu Nantian also happily returned the greetings and said with a smile. Just as Lu Nantian said, the first row of words did not appear for long. The second row of words flickered below, and another row of words appeared. Fallen Star, Jade Lake Immortal Park, Ancient Heaven Stage Sect. A brilliant and enchanting smile immediately surfaced on the Falling Star Garden Master's pretty face the instant this line of information appeared. She too did not expect that a second heavenly sect would appear in the inheritance land within the Yuan Energy Tower this time. Moreover, it was obtained by Luo Xing. This naturally caused her to be extremely happy in her heart. Sister Fallen Star, your Jade Lady Starcourt's Fallen Star is indeed worthy of being the second genius of Muqin County. She actually obtained the Heaven Stage sect's inheritance. It seems that her fortune is not shallow. Lu Nantian laughed and congratulated the master of the meteorite. Naturally, the others were also full of envy and congratulated the master of the meteorite, causing the master of the meteorite to chuckle non-stop. Her face was no longer as cold as usual. After Fallen Star was Qin Batian, Barbarian Mountain Sect, Ancient Earth Stage Sect. Although it was only an Earth Stage Sect, Marquis Yongsheng Qin Nai was already quite satisfied. Moreover, after this row of words appeared, Qin Nai's gaze faintly fell on Xu Chang, who was not far away with an ugly expression. Thinking of Xu Tianliang of Baichuan Marquis Mansion being eliminated early, Qin Nai was secretly delighted. After all, the relationship between Yongsheng Mansion and Baichuan Marquis Mansion was not very good, and there were often some small conflicts. Now that he saw Xu Chang suffer, Qin Nai was naturally gloating. Xu Chang also felt the faintly discernible mocking expression on Qin Nai's face. His mood became even worse, and the hatred he had for Zhuo Wen in his heart grew even thicker. If it wasn't for that damned Zhuo Wen, how could Xu Tianliang have been eliminated? Now, he didn't even get an ancient inheritance. Not long after Qin Baishan's words appeared, the ownership of the fourth ancient inheritance was also displayed on the light screen. Clear Lotus, Wind Sword Sect, Ancient Earth Stage Sect. When Clear Lotus' name finally appeared, whether it was the master of the meteorite or the others, they couldn't help but be stunned. It's actually Clear Lotus of the Jade Lady Star Court? I remember that Clear Lotus is only at the Ultimate Emperor stage. How could she obtain an ancient inheritance? Seeing that Clear Lotus had also obtained an ancient inheritance, Xu Chang's face became more and more unsightly, and he coldly snorted. The master of the meteorite didn't care about Xu Chang's sarcastic words. There was also a trace of doubt on her face. In her opinion, it was already quite amazing that Clear Lotus could enter the ancient inheritance land. Now that she had obtained an ancient inheritance, this news really shocked her. Could it be that Zhuowen voluntarily gave up an ancient inheritance to Clear Lotus? I remember that Clear Lotus of your Jade Lady Star Court has a good relationship with Zhuowen. Lu Nantian suddenly interjected. Hearing this, the master of the meteorite felt relieved. After Clear Lotus returned from the ancient cavern mansion, she had done a lot of things for Zhuowen. Moreover, before the opening of the Vitality Tower, she had also come forward to help Zhuowen. In fact, she had always known about these things, but at that time, she thought it was just a small matter between the younger generation, so she didn't care. But now, it seemed that Zhuowen was a person who knew how to repay kindness. She didn't expect that he would directly give an ancient inheritance to Clear Lotus. This made the master of the meteorite have a good impression of Zhuowen. There is still the last ancient inheritance. If there is no accident, it should be Zhuowen's. Lu Nantian stared at the light screen and smiled. It's definitely young friend Zhuo Wen. With the strength that young friend Zhuo Wen has displayed, apart from Elvia Tao and Luo Xing, it's really impossible for anyone else to have the strength to contend against him, said the master of Meteorite Garden with a delicate smile. After confirming that Clear Lotus's inheritance was given up by Zhuowen, the master of the meteorite couldn't help but speak for Zhuowen. This should be the so-called love me, love my dog. The other people on the high platform had no objection. Zhuowen's strength had already been recognized by them, and even exceeded their expectations. It was naturally not difficult for him to obtain an ancient inheritance. Under the expectant gazes of many people, the owner of the fifth ancient inheritance gradually appeared on the light screen. Ling Wushuang, Carefree Manor, Ancient Earthstep Sect. When this line of information was finally displayed on the light screen, whether it was the platform or the surrounding square, it instantly became incomparably silent. Everyone was stunned. This was because the owner of the last ancient inheritance was actually not Zhuowen, but Lingtian City's Ling Wushuang. There was such a huge contrast between their guesses and reality that many people couldn't even react. It's actually Ling Wushuang? That Zhuowen? He's a fierce person who defeated Xu Tianliang and Zhu Kai. How could he not be able to win against Ling Wushuang? Could it be that Zhuowen was heavily injured in the battle with Xu Tianliang and Zhu Kai, and Ling Wushuang took advantage of the situation? That's possible. No matter how heaven-defying Zhuowen is, he should have been injured after continuously battling Xu Tianliang and Zhu Kai. Ling Wushuang's strength isn't weak either, so it's not impossible for him to defeat an injured Zhuowen. Instantly, the surrounding area continuously became noisy. Many people made their own guesses. They all thought that Zhuowen was heavily injured and unable to continue fighting, so Ling Wushuang took advantage of him. Among them, the happiest person was undoubtedly the lord of Lingtian City, Ling Tian. Originally, he didn't have much hope that Ling Wushuang would obtain the ancient inheritance, but this result made him so excited that he was speechless. What a pity. That Zhuowen's really unlucky. He's clearly strong enough, but because of this, he ended up benefiting someone else. Just thinking about it makes me feel that it's not worth it for him. Many people in the crowd sighed. They knew that when the last ancient inheritance didn't display Zhuowen's name, it meant that Zhuowen's legend had come to an end. Boom. Just as many people were shaking their heads in pity, a blood-red pillar of light suddenly shot into the sky from the top of the Origin Chi Tower. The sky was instantly dyed a terrifying blood red, and at a glance, it looked like a sea of blood. Following this, everyone was shocked to discover that a blood-red line of words slowly appeared on the light screen, appearing before everyone's eyes like wriggling blood vessels. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.